King. Okay, welcome everybody to the two things it takes to run a highly successful repair shop. My name is Kelly the Coach, or Kelly Bennett. Just a really quick introduction. I started my business in Calgary in 1987. That's where I'm sitting right now in Calgary. I started with a workshop called Starting a Successful Business, and I traveled across Canada teaching people how to start a business for a living, and it was a lot of fun. We get into classes, and I don't know if you know this, but for those of you that are online, that are self-employed, you own your own business, only 3% of Canada's population is self-employed. It's the same in the US, and if you Google it, it's almost exactly 3% worldwide. So only 3% of people run their own business. And I would ask people, why are you here? Why do you want to start your own business when most people won't do it, or don't want to do it, or can't do it, or whatever? And they say stuff like, I want to be my own boss. I don't want anybody telling me what to do. They obviously haven't worked with any customers yet. I want to go in when I want to leave when I want to take my vacations and holidays when I want, and I want to make a lot of money. My job, or answer was, I think you're looking for a job with the federal government. I don't think you're looking at running your own business. You know what they say, when you run your own business, you only work half a day. Half a day, well, that's 12 hours a day, because 12 hours is a half a day. And I've had some people say, how do you get away with that 12 hours a day? One of the biggest, when usually it's more, but one of the biggest differences between teaching people how to start a business for a living and now teaching business management is there tends to be a whole lot more excitement when people are starting. Not that there's people not excited in their business, I'm not saying that, but overall, there tends to be, when you first start, you're an entrepreneur, you're excited, and you remember those days where you had your business cards and you brought them everywhere you went, and you wanted to talk to everybody about where they get their car fixed, and you're in the grocery store and you're talking to people, hey, where do you get your car fixed, and you've got your business card. And one of my mentors, Bob O'Connor, and I sent out an article that I'd written about Bob O'Connor and Canadian technician called Remembering My Best Mentor Ever. I'll talk about Bob a little bit in this session. And I sent out an article, hopefully you had a chance to read it, on selling parts and how to sell parts in a more price-conscious world. But Bob would say that if you went back to your business and you started to run it like you just started yesterday, he said your business would instantly improve. And I believe that. I think that if we stayed as an entrepreneur, some people have read the book, The E-Myth Revisited with Michael Gerber, great book. And basically, it's really a simple concept. He said that we spend so much time working in our businesses that we don't have time to work on our businesses. And we technically cease to be an entrepreneur because now we become an employee of a business that needs to be there, and we don't really work on the business, we work in the business. And so if you had that mindset of when you just started and that excitement and, you know, bringing your business cards with you everywhere and talking about the business, he said business would instantly improve. Just a quick deal with Bob O'Connor. I want to briefly mention what happened there. I started my business, as I said, in '87. I received a phone call from a university in British Columbia asking if I could do automotive training, and I said I'd love to. I'm going to date myself even a little bit more here. I was a service advisor in Calgary in 1978, 79, and 80, and then I went into the oil industry because the grass is greener on the other side of the fence, as we know, and then it quickly turned brown, and the oil industry, just like it's doing right now in Alberta, went upside down. And I went to work for the Board of Education, and that's when I wrote the workshop on starting a successful business. But I went to the university to teach the class, and what it was an 80-hour class spread out over 3 months, where the federal government was paying for people to take training who own their own businesses. And for the Canadians that are on board, there is funding available from the federal government right now. You can search it. It's a skills upgrade. You can Google it. It's a federal government grant that allows you to train existing employees. Back in the day, it was for shop owners, or business owners, I should say. But today, if you want to upgrade the skills of an employee, teach your service advisor. I know a fellow who sent his technician off to a welding course, and the government will pay up to 75% of the training, up to $10,000 per employee that you have per year, and it's non-refundable. For the Americans that are on board, maybe your new president's going to do something like that for you, I don't know. But back in the day, it was for business owners, and I did a session on business plan and one on financial management, and I never did get a chance at that time to meet Bob, because Bob was teaching his technician time management class, which is as true today as it was then. It's amazing information. Tom, you're on board, you know about that information, and it really is the crux of making money in this industry. And so I finally did get a chance to meet Bob here in Calgary. I was asked if I would go and learn his material to see if I'd be interested in teaching it. So I got a chance to meet Bob. I sat in a 2-day time management class of his, and I was quite impressed with it. And I came on board, picture of Bob here, and I worked with Bob, and then he decided that he would choose me as the trainer, and that was an honor to me that Bob said he handpicked me. And then after working with him for a while, he dubbed me the enter-trainer. He said, you know how to enter-train people, and you make it entertaining and you make it fun. And anyway, so I got a chance to meet Bob. We traveled across the country and traveled across the United States. I got to know Bob really, really well. Interesting fellow at many aspects. He certainly didn't mince words. He made it clear the way he was saying things, and some people saw him as, you know, almost like a tyrant. But Bob was generous, gentle, teddy bear kind of a guy, but he was very clear when he made things clear about training. Anyway, when Bob was 55 years old, I was on a trip with him. We went to Atlanta. We were going to meet with a major parts company there, and he called it his double nickel. He was 55. We went out for dinner, and we had this amazing conversation about our industry. And he was talking about how some people implement and some people don't, and from his experience, where the best implementation was. And he was very clear with Bob. It was people that were in management groups. He did two things, really. He brought training to independent repair shops way back in the 80s, training that we desperately needed as independents. He had owned shops, he worked in dealerships, and he brought the whole technician time management concept of labor inventory and brought it to our industry. And it revolutionized many shops. Many of the people online know Bob, and you took his training, and you're still using his stuff today. Anyway, then we talked about management groups and how that people in a management group were much better implementers. In training, I've said many times that training does not increase the success of your business. It's implementation of the training. It's to take that information, go back, and make changes with it. On the bottom of my action plan, years ago, I started years ago with the action plan, and it said on the bottom that it is better to do a couple of things all of the way than many things halfway. And I find that human nature will start something, we stop, we go on to something else, and something's important for a couple weeks, and then something else becomes important. But when you're in a management group and you're working together as a team, those other members of your team are challenging you and putting it together. I recall when I was writing articles for Canadian Technician, I wrote for them for 8 years, about 80 some articles that I wrote for them over the years. And there was a fellow that made a comment in the magazine, and he said, if people out there in shops need Kelly Bennett's help, they really should never have started their business in the first place. He was thinking that when you go into business, you should know everything you need to know when you start the business. And it was almost comic when I looked at it, but I thought, you know, he's not accurate at all. And I thought the first thing that came to mind is that every professional athlete needs a coach. It doesn't matter how good you get. If you're Tiger Woods, amazing golfer, still needs a coach. Phelps, the greatest swimmer in the entire world, still needs a coach. And I think the question is who's a better swimmer, Phelps or his coach? Phelps. Who's a better golfer, Tiger Woods or his coach? Tiger Woods. But a coach is not just somebody who helps you with the aspect of swimming or golfing or football or hockey or whatever it is. Your coach drives you, they inspire you, they encourage you, they push you, they know when you need to be coached and when you need to be a cop as a coach and you need to inspire, but you need to, you know, all those things that happen. The movie Miracle comes to mind where that coach did amazing things, excuse me, to make these amazing hockey players a team. And it is about a team. And Bob and I excuse me, a bit of a cold. We would teach a technician time management class for 2 days, which was the most brilliant of all of them. Then we did a service advisor class for 2 days. A month later, we went back and we did financial management training for 2 days, which I was a bit intimidated with about the time, learning all that. And I can tell you, and you'll see it tonight, that it's really my favorite subject. The financial management part of your business is really the crux of the business. It's really what I call the GPS, and I'll explain that shortly. And then we teach a 2-day human resources class. So it was 8 days of training spread out over 4 months, and I traveled all the way across the U.S., and I've been very fortunate excuse me, as a Canadian, to have been to all 50 states. Love the US, love Canada, both great countries. I think they're the best countries in the world. But I knew what would happen. I knew some people would come and they'd come to the first class and they'd get their binder and we'd give them the materials for that binder and they'd get all excited and motivated and then they'd go back to the shop, and that's when life happens. One of my favorite authors said that the average manager, he didn't mean automotive, but the average manager in any business is interrupted 232 times a day. 232 times a day. You go back, you've got these great ideas. It's like when you go to your shop in the morning and you've got your to-do list of the stuff that you really want to get done that day. And you're busy all day long, 232 interruptions. At the end of the day, you look at the to-do list and nothing is ticked off except you. And you think, okay, what did I do today? What did I do? Because I didn't do the stuff on my list. And if you're like me, you'll think of the things you did and add them to the list. Sorry. Internet connection probably. And you get your list at the end of the day and you look at it, you think, okay, well, I did this, and you write it down and cross it off for the pure satisfaction that you got stuff done. One of my favorite quotes that I used when I was teaching the Starting a Business workshop was that running an automotive repair shop is really quite simple. All you need to do is to get some stuff and sell it to people for more than what you paid for it. That's all there is to it, really, except for a few thousand details. And it's those details that bog us down because we have to wear a lot of hats. In a large corporation, you have departments that look after all sorts of things. I was on my LinkedIn account today, and it's business is a lot about social media today, as we know, and I was on my LinkedIn and I saw a fellow who worked with a company in Canada called Hudson Bay Company, the oldest Canada in North America as far as I know, and his job was he was the purchaser of impulse items and convenience items. In other words, his whole job with this massive company is to go around the world and buy impulse stuff, the stuff that we see at the tills that makes us want to buy it, and convection items. And I thought, that's all he does. And then there's people who do the furniture purchasing, and there's people who do the other purchasing. In big business, they've got a marketing department and a sales department, and they've got an accounting department. And some people, all they do is, accounts receivable A to F, and everybody else does the rest of it, or accounts receivable, accounts payable clerks, and they've got human resource people, and they have all these departments. Well, when you're in a small business, you are the HR department. You do the hiring, you do the firing, you are the coach, you are the boss, you do the performance evaluations, you look after the marketing, you look after the financials, you look after the sales, and so you wear a lot of hats. And the problem is we sometimes don't get focused. And I think one of the best things you can possibly do is to take what I call a professional development day, and that's time where you don't go to the business, you go someplace else. Maybe you're at home, you can work there, maybe you can't, maybe there's too many distractions, maybe there's kids or TV or whatever it might be. Maybe you go to a coffee shop, which tends to be loud, but like me, I bring my computer, put my headset on, ignore people, and get stuff done. But the opportunity to get away from the business, to work on your financials, to work on your marketing. Because if you're interrupted 232 times a day and you're trying to read your financials, well, you can't focus because of all the interruptions, the phone calls, and all these people that want to talk to you, etc. Anyway, back to the training. So people would go, and I know it would happen with some people, not everybody, but they'd get the binder and put today's material in it, take a whole bunch of notes, take the binder back to the shop, put it down on their desk, and get busy with life. And then a month later, they go, oh, that training's coming up again. And they grab that binder, some people for the first time in the entire month, to go to the training, to get new material, to put into that binder, to take a whole bunch of notes, and they're there for 2 days, and they're going to change all these things, and they go back to the shop, and the binder goes there, and they get busy with all the stuff they do, and then they come back to another training program, and you get what happens, and it's all about training and not so much about implementation. And so Bob and I had that discussion about how it's about training more than anything else. Another thing that was significant is that I took over Bob's first management group in Canada, in Vancouver, British Columbia, on my birthday. And so I just turned 55, and I just thought, isn't it interesting? It's kind of all full circle, and just the birthday thing with Bob and myself and double nickels, etc. 55 years old, and so I took over his management group in Vancouver, British Columbia, and I got to work with some really neat people. And so, having said that, by the way, it was in Vancouver, but there was people that were all over North America and Canada that were coming to those groups. And another quick story, just so you know why I put this together, the two things that it takes and what motivated that. I was contacted by, I just got to take a sip of water here, my voice is getting dry. If you know anything about Calgary, Alberta, it's the driest part of Canada. And I was in British Columbia. I lived there for a while doing some training. We set up a training center. And I received a phone call from a fellow who was injured. He was a technician. He'd worked for a shop for 30 years. He was a brilliant tech. And he was injured. He was working on a car one day and something happened. I don't know all the details, but he drastically hurt his shoulder and he had to have surgery. And he was told by his doctor, you can't be a technician anymore. So he contacted me and said, I love the industry. I want to stay in it. Would I train him to be a manager? And I said, yes. And so workers' compensation. Workers' compensation. Sorry, I'm not sure. I guess the system is great, but whenever a new person comes on, it doesn't always mute everybody. And so I'm going to see if I can go back there. If you have the ability to mute your own phone, that would be great. Audio here. It's one of the problems with having to control the screen and the call. And anyway, so I did. I trained him. I did put together a program. We did 3 days of training on site. He came to the training center there. We trained him one-on-one, and I'd arranged for him to watch all the webinars that I did as well. So that was many hours of that. And then we had arranged to go out to some shops, and I wanted to do some of the training with him in shops. I wanted him to go into the field and, you know, in the trenches, so to speak, and I'd arranged with a colleague for him and I to go to a shop and spend, we were going to spend about a day and a half there. And we were there for the first day. I'd not been to that shop before. It was one that was recommended to me, and it was neat. It was a good shop. I was working with this guy's son. He'd taken, I think, a 3-day class with us, but as far as I know, that was it. He was actually in a different industry, and his dad wanted him to work for him, and so he came to work for his son. His dad. And so I was there and didn't see the dad much. I saw the son, and I was watching the way he did things, and I thought, oh my goodness, he's selling parts at list. He was using the estimating. I was watching what he was doing, and it was list, and I'm looking at the financials, and I think the parts gross profit was something like 38%, and his tire gross profit was 11%, and they were selling less than 4 hours a day per technician, and I'm looking at the financials thinking, this is a mess. And there's no doubt they were not making much money. And I know that even though the dad had had the business for many, many years, it seems it was over 25 years, he was still obviously putting money into the business to keep it afloat. And I thought, oh, this is really not good. But it was a good opportunity for this fellow to see a different shop because, of course, he had been there at another shop for 30 years. So I contacted some other people excuse me, that I knew in the industry, some of them that were in Bob's original group in Canada way back, I guess it was 1995, 96 when I took over that group on my birthday. I think it was 96. So I phoned some of the people I know there, and I said, you know what, I've got a guy, I'm training him as a manager, and now understand that it was a calculated move as well because I wanted to help him get a job, and it was really neat because I brought him out to 5 different shops. And the last shop that we went to, another father who his son took over the business. The father's name's Peter, and he took over the business. Peter's the son, Dave's the dad. And he ended up hiring this guy, Terry, that I was working with workers' compensation and still now works there as a manager, which is really neat. But we went out to these other shops, and I don't exaggerate things. The first shop that I took him to was Scott. Scott runs management groups himself, so he does what I do locally in British Columbia. And he was in the group way back when with Bob O'Connor and then when I was the group leader. And I'm not exaggerating this. He, last July, did $53,000 per technician per month. Now, that's the superstar. That's the exception. That's not the rule. It was his best month ever. He blew out of the water, and I was really impressed. He gave his staff a gift of a trip to SEMA as a gift. So he shut down the shop for a few days and sent all of his staff down to Las Vegas to SEMA. But $53,000, now I know it's possible. It's certainly not going to happen every month. That's not his average month. And I'm thinking maybe he had a little bit of work in progress in June that got billed out, in July, because he would normally do about $45,000 a month. But we went to that shop, and it's beautiful, and he was showing me the blueprints for the new building he was building. He was so excited. We're sitting in his boardroom, And I look up on the wall, and here's a whiteboard. And on the whiteboard, it said productivity, efficiency, proficiency for the day before, and month to date. We went to another shop, and not quite as great as that one, but really good shop, a really well-run shop, beautiful facility. It was this new building. It was incredible. And we're sitting in the office, and I look up, and here's a whiteboard. It says productivity, efficiency, and proficiency. We went to another shop of another member. They're all in the same geographic region in Vancouver, within probably 30 miles, 50 kilometers of each other, something like that. And we went to that shop. Amazing numbers. I got to see the financials, and of course, I ran the group, so I got to see their data at the time as well. And I look up, and here's a whiteboard that says productivity, proficiency, efficiency. And then we went to Peter's shop. It was the fish shop we went to. And his dad, Dave, was in a management group that I ran. It wasn't Bob's group at the time. It was a different group. But same thing, whiteboard, productivity, efficiency, and proficiency. And I thought, isn't it interesting that the common thing with all of these well-run shops doing amazing numbers is they know their data. They know their numbers. They're on their game. And productivity and efficiency impacts your profitability more than anything else that you do. And that's what Bob brought to independence that was well done in dealerships with time clock and time cards and tracking productivity, efficiency, and proficiency. And he brought that to us. There's a fellow I trained in Ontario. He took a session from me initially 20 years ago. This past November. His name's Rex. And I've been training his son for the last 7 or 8 years. So I am still feeling a bit old. People say, my dad took your class back in the 90s. So gee, thanks for sharing. But he said, Kelly, I'll tell you what I learned. He said, when I learned about labor inventory, when I learned how to properly sell my labor, when I learned how to go from selling 4 hours a day per tech to 5 hours a day per technician to 6 and 7 and then 8 and sometimes 9. There's months where, good months where they'll do over 10 hours a day per technician. He said, when I learned how to sell the labor, when I learned that labor was an inventory, when I learned to maximize my labor sales, when I learned to stop the labor leak, we call it, he said that's when it changed. And labor sells everything that you sell in our industry. Parts don't sell labor, labor sells parts. Labor drives the business. Labor sells parts and sublin and tires and towing and shop supplies and environmental fees. And the better that you are at selling labor, the better you're going to be at all of it. And that's one thing that I say, this is my 30th year training, and I look back and I see the people who've done really well really are the people who really focused in on labor and realized that labor runs the business. Now, having said that, I want to do a little bit of a commercial here. I've got a technician who's looking for a job. Unfortunately, he lost his last job. I'm not really sure. I mean, the quality of his workmanship was absolutely phenomenal. This guy, he knows how to use a lift. This is a real picture. This is a real situation. Certainly not a friend of mine, but this is not a joke. I mean, you take a look, that car is off the floor by at least 5 inches. And I guess that's how we thought you raised a car. But yeah, he didn't stay around long. My son, Scott, was a service advisor for 3 years, and I sent him this picture. It went around Facebook, actually. And I sent him the picture, and he said, oh, my God, Dad, how would you explain that to a customer that your car was damaged because the technician did this? I said, well, when he's sober, he's pretty good. But, when he comes to work drunk, it's not a great way to do it. But, yeah, I'm not the guy that you want to hire as a technician. Anyway, I just wanted to lighten the mood a little bit. Bob dubbed me the Enter Trainer, and it certainly works. Back to the two things that it takes. And I know for sure by looking at people who do extremely well, the two things they have in common is they know their numbers, they're on their game, they're selling the labor inventory, but they understand effective labor rate, and they understand labor to parts ratio, and they understand these things. And I'm going to introduce you to a composite that each of the shops that I told you about that's in British Columbia uses the same financial composite. I worked with Bob O'Connor's composite back in the day, which in the day was state-of-the-art. It was a great composite. Not so great today because it was a bit antiquated. We're talking many years ago. I worked with one with Whirlpac years ago. It was pretty good. Whirlpac is an amazing company. It was just the composite wasn't so great that somebody had developed. And then Rex had a composite. It was good, but it wasn't great. And I was looking for something better and better. And I was on Vancouver Island several years ago. And there's a guy that ran the group, that the people that were in that I just talked to you about. And he said, I want to show you our composite. Now, looking back at the composite, it's very much Bob O'Connoritized, if you want to use that, and some things that I brought to the industry. So it was the groups of these people who do extremely well who created their own composite. And he showed me the composite they put together, and I love using spreadsheets. It's not my expertise to build all the math behind it. I have a concept. I'll show you the algorithmic calculator. I had this idea in my mind, and I hired somebody to put it together, and it works even better than I was hoping because he was brilliant with it. But the composite I'm going to show you is the same composite this group uses, and when he showed it to me, I said, I've got to buy this. I have to buy it, and so I now own the composite. Of course, they still use it in their own group. And the second thing that was very clear to me is people that are on a team. And there's several different management companies out there that have management groups. But when you're working together as a team, when you're working with other like-minded shop owners, the implementation is just far superior. You've got people that are helping you. And what I learned in running management groups across Canada and across the U.S. was that everybody is king or queen of something. Everybody on this call, whether it's live or you're listening to the recorded session, everybody on this call is better at something than everybody else on this call. We all have areas that we hone in on that we're extremely good at. There might be, for example, a guy named Jim. He was in the management group I ran in Ontario. And he was the king of pre-booking appointments. And I don't exaggerate this. At any given time, he has over 1,000 pre-booked appointments, and he educates his customer. We need to see you 4 times a year. If you drive lots, we want to see you more than that. If you need an oil change every 5 weeks, we need to see you every 5 weeks. But if you drive less, it doesn't mean you come in when you need your oil change. We want to see you spring, summer, fall, winter, spring, summer, fall, winter, spring, summer, fall, winter. And when you're in his shop for the spring, he books your fall. When you're, or your summer, I should say. When you're there for the summer, he books your fall. When you're there for the fall, he books your winter. Right now, they're taking off winter tires, and they already pre-booked the appointment to have the winter tires put back on next October. And then in October, they set the date to have the tires taken off. And so people go back and go back and go back. Well, that's his thing. And he was very good at it. He was the king of it. But we had somebody in the group who had the highest effective labor rate, and we'd look at that and think, wow, how do you do 136% effective labor rate? And they would bring their expertise with that. And then you've got somebody else that says, well, you know what, I've started using this algorithmic calculator, and I've got this, and I've got my parts gross profit up to 51, and people go, wow, and how did you do that? And she explains how she did that. And everybody's king or queen of something. And when you're working together with other shop owners who bring the expertise that you don't have, none of us has it all together, none of us. But together we have so much more working together as a team. And very clearly, those are the 2 biggest differences. Recently, Kevin King's on the line with me. He's a person I selected, I guess hand-selected like Bob chose me, but I wanted to work with somebody else to help bring expertise to this industry that I don't have any. I'm going to get him to introduce himself here shortly. But him and I were doing a session in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada in the end of January, first part of February, and it was called GPS. It was how to do the financial part of your business and understand the financials. And in business, there's 3 ways to make more money, only 3. And by the way, you are going to receive this PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to save it as a PDF, and I'm going to send it to you. In addition to that, I'm going to be introducing you to about 6 or 7 different spreadsheets, and I'm going to be sending you most of those. One is reserved specifically for group members. I'll show it to you briefly, but I'm going to be sending you the algorithmic calculator and the Power of Team spreadsheet and some of the other spreadsheets that we're going to cover. And we're in this class, and I'm talking about 3 ways to make more money. You can increase your sales, you can increase your gross profit, or you can reduce expenses. And I don't think, I'm not going to say it's impossible because I'm not that black and white, but it's almost impossible to save a business or to run an extremely successful business by simply being a good financial manager with expenses. You can get so caught up in all these little things, you know, the expression of stepping over $10 bills to pick up pennies. And I've seen some people and some of the things that they've done to try to make more money by reducing expenses. For example, I mean, I know it's helpful. You take your paper and you put it into your fax machine backwards, and you can save money on paper, and heck, it's good for the environment to do that. And you've got paper going through there, and you've got your fax machine. Of course, more printers today, not so much fax machines, but And I figured it out. If you're really good at that, if you're always putting, paper into the fax machine or, sorry, more into your printer now. Give you an example of this. I had a fellow, true story. He got his invoice from a part vendor. He ordered parts, and at the end of the month, he opens his mail, and here's his invoice. And on the back of the invoice is something else printed. And that's one of the problems I found is when I've put paper into a printer backwards, and then I've got a piece of paper on my desk that's printed on both sides, and I'm looking at it thinking, which side was I really wanting to keep here? And I look at it and think, well, that's wasting time, but I saved paper. And he gets his invoice, and on the back of it is the actual income statement for his part vendor, because he was saving money. He thought, well, I've got this income statement, I don't need to look at it anymore. And he printed off in his printer an invoice that went to the guy. And he said, I'm looking at this income statement for this parts store, and I thought, oh my God, he's not doing very good. And he said, I phoned him and said, well, God, things aren't good and going so well over there. I'm kind of wondering if you're still going to be in business next month. He said, what are you talking about? He said, well, your gross profit on parts is horrible. He said, mine's 50. And he said, you're only doing a whatever. He said, what are you talking about? He said, well, I got my invoice today, and on the back of it is your income statement. And the guy said, oh my God, you're kidding. Well, I figure if you're really good at it, if you put paper in there and you're really good at that, if you do really well at it, in a year you could save $5. If you're even better at it, you might even get up to $7, maybe $10. $10 a year would be a stretch in saving money. That's the wrong emphasis. And I'm not saying it's wrong to put paper. That's not what I'm saying. But sometimes the focus is wrong. And that was, I think, the first day, Kevin, you were in a full day session with me. And there was a fellow who was talking about parts, and he was making phone calls for parts and going online. And we were in a training center of a parts company who was sponsoring the training. They were paying for me to be there. And I was upset with this guy who was complaining about the part vendor in the class. He said, these guys, I won't mention the name of the vendor, but he said, these guys, you're so expensive. He said, I look at stuff and you guys are higher on something than others. And so he'd phone around and he'd find somebody else with a part that was cheaper, and he'd buy that, and he'd be mad at the person who was the highest. And I said, just a second. I said, if this was a Napa class, you could do the same thing. You could say to Napa, your stuff's too expensive. This is too expensive, and I saw this, and that's more expensive than everybody else. And if it was a CarQuest class, you could do the same thing and say, well, you guys are really expensive on this particular part. Or if it was a WorldPack class or an advanced class or whoever, it doesn't matter. You could pick on anybody and say your parts are too expensive. I said, look, you're focusing on putting paper in machines backwards. You're trying to save a little bit of money by buying parts cheaper, which, by the way, is very time consuming. Secondly, is it usually doesn't work. You buy a part from somebody else cheaper, and sometimes you sacrifice quality, service, and delivery to get a cheaper part, mark it up the same way, and make less money. And maybe now your wife's upset with you because you can't go on the cruise because your loyalty wasn't good enough to get the cruise, or your rebate check wasn't as big as it used to be because you weren't as loyal. And I wrote an article about part loyalty and how to become loyal to a vendor. I was speaking with one of my coaching clients actually the last couple of days. And with one of his vendors, he said, I spend $10,000 a month. And he said, I have a big hammer. And that was the point. If you are loyal with somebody and you've got a big hammer and you have things that are really serious issues and you bring them up, they take you seriously. But if you spend a little here and a little there and you're spreading out that loyalty, then your hammer isn't as big, and some of the things that go along with that. And I'm not saying that would never be the case, but if your emphasis is always on that, and somebody else in that class, Kevin, right, he came to his rescue and said, oh, Kelly, he said, it doesn't take long at all. He said, it's just click, click, click. And I know what he means. In my day, we had to make the phone calls, but now it's click, click, click. But it's not just click, click, click. I'm not that stupid. You don't just go and click and see the Napa's part, and click and see CarQuest part, click and see Auto Camping or any of the other vendors that are out there. Hopefully I've mentioned them all. But it's not that way. You need to mentally think, okay, which one was there? What was their list? What was the cost? What could I sold it for? Did I put it into the matrix to see? Because you can take a part, get a cheaper one, put it into your parts matrix, and actually make less money because you spent less on it. So in your mind, you think, okay, well, if I bought this and I sold it for that, but I got it cheaper, but I still sold it for that, then I'm going to make more. And it's just a lot of work. And he was coming to his rescue, and it got into this conversation about parts. And I said, look, we're talking about putting paper in printers backwards here. I'm talking about how to do $45,000 a month per technician, or $50,000 or $48,000, whatever it is. We're going to show you how to calculate your potential. Let's focus on $40 grand a month, $45,000 a month per technician. and not be thinking about this other stuff. And Kevin's online, as I mentioned, and he sells software. Personally, I have my favorite software is GemGuard. It's a great system. And I've seen Kevin talk to people, and well, how much is it? How much is it? And there's all this, how much is it? How much is it? And how much is that? And I've seen people say, well, you know, Identifix is pretty good, but it's expensive. And oh my God, that's a really good machine they've got, but it's expensive, and I can't really afford to do that. And how am I going to pay $150 a month? And how am I going to pay $170 a month? And I'm thinking, you know, people who are doing $45,000 a month are not trying to figure out how they're going to make a $170 payment on software. And I've seen people look at Kevin and go, wow, $170 a month, and they're trying to figure out where that money is going to come from. They're trying to figure out how they can make more money by spending less. There's three ways to make more money: increase your sales, increase gross profit, reduce expenses. I don't know a business that could be saved by reducing expenses. But I know that many need to increase their gross profit, and they're not charging for what they need. My goal as a trainer is very, very simple. I want you to get paid for everything you do at the right amount of money. So I want to bring you into what I call GPS. And it was that day that Kevin was at the class and we were teaching this GPS. And I think GPS is very much like financial management for any kind of business, not just automotive. But we've got the, I'm just going to move something off my screen here. I'm using dual monitors. By the way, if you're not using dual monitors, I just started a little while ago. I got a 32-inch monitor. Now my 27 looks so small. And for the price of monitors today, I get into some shops and I see people working on these really small monitors, and I think, you know what? 32-inch monitor for $400, just buy it and move on. Don't try to figure out how you're going to pay for that. Just get them a nice big monitor so they're not squinting. But a GPS does three things. And as a Canadian in a small town going to the United States and being in Chicago and Baltimore and Atlanta and San Francisco, and you're in a big city and you're not used to it, it's kind of scary. And that's where your GPS is really helpful, because it shows you where you are. You look down, you think, oh, now I know where I am. You can't really get to some place even if you know where it is, if you don't know where you're starting from. So GPS shows you where you are. Secondly, you tell it where you want to be. It doesn't tell you where you want to go. You program the address. And then the third thing it does is shows you step by step how to get to where you're going. And the one thing that I saw, and Kevin, you can testify to it, and other people online that are really well versed in the industry, is a lot of people don't know where they are. They don't know what their gross profit is on something. They don't know what their effective labor rate is. They don't know productivity, efficiency. I've been down the block 30 years. I can tell you without exaggeration that over 90%, and I'm being generous here, 90% of shops do not track their technicians' time. They don't track productivity. They don't track efficiency. I was asked to do some coaching in Calgary for 15 different elite repair shops. And by the way, some of those were in Bob's management group way back in the 90s that I met when I was here. And I went into all 15 shops, and I don't exaggerate, not one of those shops had a time clock. They didn't even have a time clock for the employees punching in and out when they got there. And I thought, the money's made in the labor inventory, and you're not selling the labor, and you don't know what your productivity is, and you don't know what your efficiency is. And again, those 5 shops that I went into with Terry, the workers' compensation guy, all of them had a whiteboard. It was all whiteboards, but all whiteboards that had productivity, efficiency, and proficiency. They understood that I need to know what's happening with labor, because if I can control that, I can control the rest of it. So your financial statements do the same thing. It shows you where you're at, and I'm going to show you key KPIs, what's called key performance indicators, to find out where you are. Then we're going to show you some benchmarks. Some of you are taking this training for the very first time and you're not familiar with the benchmarks, and there's some people on the line like Tom that know these benchmarks extremely well. I've changed some of them and adapted some and added some others. I was actually doing some math today on what it costs to have a service advisor do an estimate, and that was kind of interesting. I wanted to find out the hidden cost of having a service advisor. And I won't get into all the detail on that, but that was kind of neat. But then we want to show you, more importantly, how to get there and some of the things that we need to do. And we can't do it all in an hour and a half to 2-hour webinar, but it's important to find out where you're at. Now, some people, when it comes to you are here, are looking at pretty big picture. And I saw this, you are here. That's a little bit too broad. I know that I'm somewhere in this galaxy, and Earth, I'm assuming, is in there. I guess that big one is the sun, but we're close to that, I guess, but third rock or whatever, I don't know. But that's too big. That's too big. Now, sometimes it's a bit scary to find out where you are, and I saw this. I thought it was totally cute, these 2 little mice looking at the sign, you are here, in the belly of the snake. Not a good place to be, but sometimes in business you can feel like you are in the belly of a snake. And I know what it's like to have the emotional part of a business, to think, oh yeah, things are picking up here and I think I'm on that next level, and I got a good crew in place and I got some good systems in place and we're just doing well. And then the mail comes and the check that you were expecting didn't come, and now payday's tomorrow and you get your bills and they seem to come consistently, not so much the money, and you think, how am I going to make payroll tomorrow? And you go from loving your business to hating your business all in the same day. I've had people say, hey Kelly, I've learned to love and hate my business all in the same hour depending on what I'm doing at that particular time. Well, that's a little bit too dangerous to find out that it's a little bit too late for you, like these poor little mice. And then we've got, you are here when you're standing right there. That's a little bit too close, and I'd say that's more of an accurate picture of what micromanagement is. And some people are micromanagers. I actually wrote an article just on that subject on micromanagement. And that's a little bit too close to know that you are here. A good indication of you are here is this. You walk into a mall that you've never been to before. We walk over, a lot of them are computerized now, and you just type in where you want to be and it shows you where you are. But regardless, it's a map. It's a map of the building you're in, the airport, the mall, whatever. We walk in there. When I walk into Chicago Airport for the first time, O'Hare, I'm thinking, wow, this is a monster. And I want to see the map because I know I'm flying out of Terminal E or whatever. Atlanta's crazy. It's got Terminal T and then A, B, C, D, E. And you need to see which building you are in of the big map and then how to get to the gate that's at E when you are sitting at Terminal T, and you got to get on the train and all of that. But the point is you need to know where you are first. That's where it starts. So what I'm going to show you today is some of the things where you are, and it's going to be mainly on financials. I'm going to be showing you some Excel spreadsheets, and I want to show you that a lot of the business is determined by the actual financial statements themselves. As I mentioned earlier, there's only 3 ways to make more money. One is to increase sales, second is to increase gross profit, and thirdly is to reduce expenses. Now, with that, I'm going to turn it over just briefly to Kevin King. And Kevin, if you could introduce yourself to everybody, and then while you're doing that, I'm going to take the time to pull up the spreadsheets and put them in the exact, well, I already have them open, but if you could just introduce yourself, Kevin, and what your take is on the automotive aftermarket repair shops.
Great. Thank you, Kelly. So as Kelly's mentioned, my name is Kevin King. I'm a GEM car representative. My primary vocation is selling software and training. I'm the U.S. representative, so I get to see a lot of the same territory that Kelly's talking about. I have the opportunity to work with a lot of customers, helping them implement new products, software technology to help them be more profitable. Our main focus is very similar to what Kelly's talking about. It's labor sales, the labor leaks. A lot of software can connect with other parts suppliers, be able to transfer over. It just becomes kind of an anomaly. Like now it's just an everyday, we expect that, right? And I completely subscribe to that. I was fortunate enough to be in the industry about the similar time that Kelly's talking about. I come from the parts background, where on the supply chain, and as technology started to come in, I was just on that cusp to be able to grasp it and be able to absorb it. And so in the late 80s, early 90s, as parts stores started to become more and more competitive and computer technology started to come involved, I started to really kind of shine that way and like it, and it ended up being what I do now in my vocation. I represent from the supply chain also paint background, so body shops with labor inventory. I worked for a paint company distributing automotive finishes, going to body shops, knocking on every week, a couple times a week, meeting shop owners, trying to help them be more profitable. It's not about the paint, it's not about the sandpaper. It's about getting that extra job through the bays and selling an extra sold hour per technician. That's really going to make the difference on the bottom line. So when I met Kelly, it's been great because I work with a lot of small shops and a lot of big shops, and I see the same things that he's preaching and that he's teaching, which is it's about the percentages. It's not a matter of you're a 17-bay shop or you're a 5-bay shop. You can implement the things that he's going to teach us and we're going to talk about and really see a substantial improvement in your bottom line immediately. You could implement it tomorrow, the stuff he's going to show you and he's going to send you. And so I'm really excited to be on this trip with him. I'll be mostly moderating unless Kelly asked me to participate and sharing the other things I have, but as I said, supply chain, parts background, that's pretty much where I come from. So Kelly, if you've got your sheets in, I'm excited to see what you're going to share with the team and try to help you keep with the time frame that you offered.
Well, firstly, I just want to show you something that I've been teaching for at least a minute now, Tom. I just got a text from Tom. Tom Ham, if you've been on IATN, you sometimes would wonder, at least years ago, if he actually lived on IATN, but he just sent me this quote, and I already put it into my PowerPoint presentation, so I'm stealing it, Tom, thank you. But he sent me this message through our chat here. It says, a technician without a time clock is like running a service station with no meters on the gas pumps. And so while you were talking, Kevin, I went online and I got a picture of a gas pump, and the cool thing about being a trainer is you get this idea, and the next thing you know, it's part of your presentation. So thank you, Tom. There's not a day that goes by that I don't learn from people in our industry, and that's a really good way of doing it. Anyway, thank you, sir. Okay, what I'm going to do is I want to pull up, Tom, you're right. I was so excited to get an email from Tom yesterday. Have huge respect for you, sir. A phenomenal operator down there in the U.S. Okay, I want to show you the spreadsheets that I was just talking about, and I'm going to be sending you these, and the first one I want to show you is what I call the power of team. Now, this is material that I learned from Bob way back in the 94, 95 period of time, and I since then have put it into a spreadsheet, and so I've kind of, did some things that in the day we used transparencies, and I used to bug Bob, because I mean, my God, he was 55 years old, and I was younger. Now I'm 55, but I said to Bob, I said, I heard that you've been in the industry so long that you actually handled the parts return for Noah's Ark. So I always used to bug him about how old he was. And great guy, by the way. When he passed away, I had a great opportunity to go down to Seattle and spend a week in his home with him. He had his hospital bed right there in the living room, and I got to spend time with him and his wonderful wife, or he called his bride Linda, and the two sons, John and Robert. And so I spent that week there. And for those of you that know Bob, he was sitting there in a chair with his laptop writing a new workshop. He was quite the workaholic for sure. But anyway, I was writing a book about the industry, and I asked if he would write the foreword to it. He said, Kelly, I don't know if I'm qualified to do that. And I said, I don't know anybody who's more qualified. And he actually dictated the foreword to the book right there. And anyway, he passed away the week later, and then I went back down and spoke at his funeral, and what a neat guy. Anyway, got to make some fun with him. Anyway, this is really the crux of where the money is in the industry. For those of you that are online that are using time clock and time cards, you're rare. Less than 10% of shops do. In fact, as I'm going to take a stab at it and say it's probably only 5% of shops do it. Now with shop management systems like GemCar, the one that you have, Kevin, has got a time clock right built into it. Excuse me, so it doesn't need to be the drudgery of a time card and that. It used to be, time clock and time cards. Now it's electronic. And I was talking to a fellow yesterday that has the electronic system with the cards that you just put in, the cards like you would have at a hotel room, and makes it a lot simpler. But the bottom line is tracking the inventory. And I wanted to show you the impact of this. And this is something, for those of you that have taken a lot of training from me, you've seen this a lot. I hardly ever will teach a class without showing this at least once, because I know that this is where the money is. I'm not going to teach you to turn off your lights in the bay at lunchtime. That might be helpful, but it's not going to change your business. It's like the paper in your machine backwards. I want to focus on selling inventory where the money is made. Every single day you buy parts, you mark them up for a desired gross profit, hopefully using a parts matrix, and you sell those parts. And every single day you buy time. You buy time from people, you mark up what you pay them to become your labor rate, and you buy and resell that time. And the better you are at buying and selling the time, the better you are going to be buying and selling parts and supplement and tires and towing and shop supplies and environmental fees. And so what I did is I took this concept of what's an average shop doing, and then some of the above average shops, and then team. It's the management group I put together. We want people to do extremely well, especially when you're in a management group. Some people are on this line, and you were, or maybe still are, in the bottom line impact groups. It used to be run by Bob O'Connor, of course. I ran a few of them, and then John Waffler, who's a good friend of mine and colleague, now runs the groups, amazing fellow. Anyway, the average technician is in a shop approximately 168 hours in a month, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less. February, a couple days less in a month, and you've got longer months. And so some months I should say have 20, 21 working days. Once in a while that's only 17 or 19, but the average is 168. And so if we take a look at what we look at as productivity and efficiency, if your technician's at your shop 8 hours a day, approximately 20, 21 working days in a month, 168 hours they're there. Now whether they're flat rate or hourly or salary, it doesn't matter. You have 168 hours of inventory. Productivity is defined as how much time they spend working on income producing work. And the average shop is about 60%. About 40% of the day is wasted. It could be waiting for parts, waiting for work, waiting for authorization. The technician can't find the work order, or we don't know where the keys are, we're looking for the car, it's a comeback, we're working on a company vehicle, whatever. It could be we're working, but we're not necessarily working on something that's income producing. They might be cleaning up or whatever. So we're not saying they're not doing anything, they're not sitting there, playing tiddlywinks, they're working, but the sad thing is that a lot of times we're spending time on cars that we're not getting paid for. The question I ask in lots of classes is, how much free work do you think you've done? Efficiency is 100%. How fast the technician is 100%. Or sorry, efficiency is how fast the technician is. So efficiency is how long did it take the technician to do that job based on how much time the book called for. And so the average technician in North America is 100% efficient if the work is sold correctly. If the job is cut and dry, get it in, get it out, they took the average of 3 technicians doing that in the factory. By the way, I've had people say, time clock and time cards, I'm not getting paid for that. I know people who worked in the factories that set the times, and they said that punching in and out of a time clock is part of the job. That is part of it. Test drives is part of it. Getting tools is part of it. Putting tools away is part of it. That's all part of the job. So I say, you've been getting paid to punch in and out, and you haven't been doing it, so let's get done what we've been getting paid for. Sounds like Bob O'Connor, doesn't it? The hours produced then would be 100. And I'm going to give you an example of spark plugs. Let's say in the morning at 8 o'clock in the morning, 8 spark plugs are dropped off at your shop, and you see them 8 o'clock in the morning, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that day, 4 of those were installed in a customer's vehicle. But at the end of the day, the other 4 that you saw there in the morning, they were there, are gone. They're just gone. You never do find them. You look around, oh well, they're gone. The next day, 8 tires are dropped off at your shop from a vendor, 8 o'clock in the morning. You count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that day 4 car tires, I should say, were put onto a customer's vehicle. But the other 4 that you saw there in the morning are gone. They're just gone. Oh well, I don't know where they went. The same place the spark plugs went, I guess. And so we've got this problem where we're buying inventory, we're selling some of it, we don't wonder what happened to the rest. Well, if that was happening with parts, spark plugs, tires, whatever, you'd freak out. And yet in the average shop, they're selling approximately half of the inventory without wondering what happened to the other 3 hours, what happened to the other 4 hours, what happened to the other 4.5 hours. We had 8 hours of inventory per technician. We only sold 100 this month. We bought 168, or at least they were there for 168. This has nothing to do with if we pay flat rate or hourly or performance-based pay, whatever you want to call it. We had them there, warm body in premise, 168 hours. The average shop only sells 100 of those. I make the labor rate simple illustration, $100. The labor potential would be $10,080. The parts to go along with that would be $9,576. When I say parts and extras, that includes that $9,576, but it also factors in sublet tires, towing, shop supplies, and environmental fees. And so this shop could do about $20,000 a month. And I tell you, I know of their shops that are doing $18,000 to $22,000 a month. But then you've got another shop, and they're 168 hours just like the other shop, but they're more productive. They spend more time working on income producing work. And in a session like this, we can't spend a huge amount of time on all the fixes, the how do you get there. But productivity has so much to do about management. It's got to do with your car count, your marketing, your selling, pre-booking appointments, pre-ordering parts, how quick you are at estimates, how organized the bays are, how organized the technicians are, motivated. There's so many factors that look at how do we increase productivity, how do we spend more time of the day working on stuff that makes money. Efficiency, there's more efficient technicians. Why? Well, maybe we sold more maintenance. If I fill up a technician's day with grunt work, they're not going to be very efficient. But if I've got lots of maintenance and more of the gravy work, so to speak, we're going to sell more. The technician's gone off to training and taking more training on how to be better at doing something. They become more efficient. We use all data, Mitchell on Demand. We use Identifix. We use resources to help us. We buy equipment. We buy extra tools that allow us to become more efficient. And now we're getting the work done in a shorter period of time. And we've paid for that. I have some people say, well, I can't really charge for that. It didn't take me very long. Well, it used to take you longer. Why? Because you didn't have a lift. You had a floor jack. Now you've got a lift. And now we've got, you know, air tools, and we've got all of these things that we've paid for to become more efficient. I don't want to make less because I sent a tech to training. I don't want to make less because I bought equipment. We now produce 141 hours. Now 141 is certainly not the 168 that we had available, but it's certainly better than next door here at 100. At the exact same labor rate, the labor potential becomes 14,000. The question is, if we are more productive, spend more time working on cars, and more efficient, faster at it, are we going to sell more parts? Absolutely. We're going to sell more parts, more sublet, more tires, more towing, more shop supplies and environmental fees. And so this shop's doing about $28,000 a month. At this shop, they're doing 168. And yes, I am sending this spreadsheet to you so you can do your own shop. 90% productivity is very good. I can tell you in our management groups, we track it. We see as high as 95. You certainly aren't going to see 100. In fact, in excess of 100 is impossible. You cannot exceed 100% productivity. Kevin, if I've been at your shop for 8 hours and you saw me there, I went for lunch, came back, so I've been in your building for 8 hours, excluding lunch. And Kevin, you said, hey, Kelly, how much time did you actually spend working on cars today? 11 hours. Really, you're only here for 8. It's not possible to spend more time working on something than you were there. The highest productivity could possibly be is 100. And you can't expect 100% productivity. You can't expect every technician every single day to spend 100% of the day working on cars. I think you tried it, Kevin, right? Remember you asked them all to quit smoking, you put them on the patch, and then you brought in the catheters. Remember that? You had them all wear catheters so they didn't have to do that business. There's no way we could spend 100% of the day. I'm just bugging you, Kevin. 90% is a really good number. Our ultimate goal is 95. 125% efficient, we see, and people on the line, you have technicians at 125 plus. We're producing 189 hours at the same labor rate. We can now do $37,800 a month, so $9,576. Now I want to show you that shop that I was talking about, 168 hours in a month. They're about 95% productive. That's Scott's shop. 135% efficient is approximately where they're at. The labor rate is $134 an hour, so they could actually do 57. So I could really get on Scott's case and say 53,000. What are you talking about? You could do 57. Again, his best month he's ever had is 53,000. But it's amazing to see that you think you're doing well until you compare yourself to somebody else. And I'll give you an example of that. A fellow that I got my car repaired with in Cochrane for many, many, many years when I lived there in Canada, in Cochrane, Alberta, Canada. He was doing okay, not tremendous, but he was doing okay. And I said, you know, you really should get part of a management group. You really should get in with some other really like-minded people. And it took, 3 or 4 years to convince him he should, and he did. He went. And I went into a shop the next day and I said, so Errol, his name's Errol. I wrote about him in articles for many years for those of you that have read Canadian Tech. In fact, the article that I sent you about remembering my best mentor ever was Dear Errol. All the articles were about Errol. They're not all stories about Errol. They're all true stories, but I picked on Errol a little bit. But the concept was simple that we had Errol. And Errol said, you know what? He said, I went to the meeting, and he said, the poster child for the group, the guy that's done the absolute best, it's a specific parts company, by the way. They started management groups way back in probably I took over those groups. I was in a serious car accident. Some of you know about that in 2003. So I took over in 2004. I ran those groups across Canada in probably 7 or 8 different cities, maybe more. And so I got to see all the shops and how they were operating. And so this guy was the king. He was the king. If you are in Canada and you know that group, I won't mention the name of the part company. That wouldn't be fair. But he was it. He was the poster child. He was winning awards for the top shop in the year, etc. Of the year. And he said, I went there and I looked at this guy and I'm thinking, you're him, eh? I should get your autograph because you're the king. He said, but we're looking at his financials because in a management group you share numbers. And it's kind of funny, Kevin. I'm sure you've heard people see, well, I don't want people seeing my numbers. Oh, you don't want Kevin seeing your numbers? No. Would you like to see Kevin's numbers? Oh, yeah, I'd like to see his numbers. Would you like to see Tom's numbers? Oh, yeah, Tom Ham. Yeah, I definitely want to see his numbers. Do you want him? Oh, I don't want him to see mine. And it's crazy. Independents are not your competition. It's the mass merchandisers. It's the huge dealership environment where they've got the entire city locked up and they've got all these dealerships and they got this dealership city where all of these dealerships are all working together there. Independents, we should work together, not against each other. It hurts us when we work against each other. Anyway, so he said, I'm sitting there and I'm looking and thinking, his labor rate's not much better than mine. The fact is, it seems to me it was the same amount. And he said, I'm looking at his parts gross profit. He's doing a little bit better than me, but not really that much. And he said, I'm looking at his sales and thinking, I'm not going to say anything to these people because they're going to think I'm bragging, but I'm doing pretty much as good as the guy who's the poster child, and this is my first meeting. He said, my peacock feathers were out there, and I'm looking around and thinking, phew, I don't want to tell people, but man, I'm doing really good. He said, then they're looking on the composite, and they're looking at one line after another, and effective labor rate and all that kind of stuff. He said, then all of a sudden I froze, and I looked and thought, how many technicians do you have? He said, 2. He said, oh. He was doing very similar numbers with 5 technicians as this guy was doing with 2. And if you're going to make the same amount of money, heck, do it with 2 technicians instead of 5. I'd rather do it with 3 rather than 5. With 2 technicians, you could have 1 advisor. With 3, it's a bit of a stretch to have 1 advisor, but you can't have 1 advisor with 5 technicians. And so the cost of running a business, having 2 advisors compared to just 1 and doing the same numbers. Anyway, I've used this spreadsheet many times. Some of you have seen me use this before. But one of the things that is a huge difference here, and what I think is the most important calculation of all, is the effective labor rate. Because you can say your labor rate's $100 an hour, but it's not $100 an hour. You're not collecting $100 an hour when it takes the technician longer. It doesn't take, if you're $100 an hour, if you gave them a 20% off discount or a $25 discount. If something went wrong and you have as a comeback, you're not making $100 an hour. You're not making $100 an hour when it's an oil change. You're not making $100 an hour in a lot of what we call the grunt work. Sometimes it's more than $100 an hour. Diagnostics, it could be like a charging system diagnosis where you charge, $50 or whatever, and it takes, 5 minutes or 12 minutes or 8 minutes or whatever. Now it's hundreds of dollars an hour. Hardly any jobs go out your door at your labor rate. Throughout the day, you can calculate it. Probably not one single job went out the door exactly to the penny at your labor rate. In order for that to happen, we'd never be able to estimate jobs up front. We'd have to tell the customer we don't know how long it's going to take. We're going to use our time clock here. We're going to find out. And at the end of the day, we're going to charge you exactly this much for every minute that we spent on the car. We'd never be able to estimate up front. The average independent repair shop is only 67% effective labor rate, which means if your labor rate's 100, you're really only collecting about 67. Look at what happened in the numbers there. $67 an hour is only $12,663, almost the same at this shop here where we're billing on 100 hours. Now we're billing on 189, but effectively it's only 67. Of course, if you're at 67, you're at 67 there, you're at 67 there, and you're at 67 there. So when we take a look at the composite, to me, the most important calculation of them all is the effective labor rate. Now, let me just want to show you. So you can do this when you get the spreadsheet. You can put your shop in here on the right-hand side. You can put it in here wherever you want. But learn how to calculate your effective labor rate. Some of you track it. We think you should track it every single day. That's not micromanagement. Most dealerships track effective labor rate every single day. Find out what your effective labor rate is and then redo it. I had a fellow, by the way, it's my favorite company name. It's a fellow in Atlanta, Canada, and all he works on is VWs. That's all he works on is Volkswagens, and the name of his shop is the Old Volks Home. And I think, oh my God, that is so completely clever. Anyway, he took training of mine in Toronto a couple of years ago, well, several years ago now, I guess, and maybe 2, sorry. And his labor rate at the time, he told me, he was 82, and after the class, he went up to 87. He bit the bullet. He said, I went $5 at once. He told me this after the fact. He's now in our management group, and I was talking with him this week. He said, Kelly, he said, I went from 82 to 87. I said, okay, great. Did anybody notice? Well, no, nobody noticed. People don't even ask the question exactly. People want to know 3 things when they walk into your shop. What's wrong with my car? How much is this going to cost? And when is it going to be ready? That's pretty much all they want to know. Some people want to know the labor rate. Some people want to know what the book time is. But most people deal with you because they know you, they like you, and they trust you. And we're on the phone the other day. He said, Kelly, although my labor rate's 87, and I don't exaggerate this stuff. I sent you the information, Kevin. He said my effective labor rate's 47. He's making $47 an hour. Here's the problem. You're paying for 168 hours whether you sell them or not. If you only sold 100 hours, you're still paying for 168. At least with spark plugs, if you don't install them, you can return them. But with labor, you can't return it. At the end of the day, it's gone. If you didn't sell it today, you can't put it on the shelf and sell it tomorrow. So your cost of payroll is astronomical. The other thing that's really interesting about this is if you're paying 168 hours every single month, and you go from selling 100 hours to making changes like the GPS on how do you get to where you're going, and you now sell 141 hours, that's 41 hours more a month, which is 100% additional gross profit because you're already paying. Your payroll doesn't change. Your payroll is the same here, here, and here. If you're paying hourly, flat rate's different. Most people pay hourly. So you're paying $168 a month. So if you now sell $189, 189 hours a month, the additional money that you see is 100% gross profit because your payroll remains the same. And not just your payroll, but your EI, your CPP, your workers' comp holiday pay, or in the U.S., SUTA and FUTA. It's all the same because we're paying for the 168. That's where the money is made. Increase productivity, spend more time working on cars, increase efficiency, and be faster at it. And I know that sounds like it's simple, and it really is. Spend more time working on cars and be faster at it. But you have 232 interruptions in a day, and we've got people that have bad attitudes, and we have to deal with customers, and the phone is ringing. We've got emails, and we've got parts, and we've got vendors, and then that gem car is trying to sell me a software, and somebody else is trying to sell me this. But you need to focus on this. And when you put the system in place of tracking productivity and efficiency, it makes an absolutely huge difference. The other thing that I wanted to show you here is that you could use this exact same spreadsheet if you wanted to show a technician what their pay could be. Let's say if they went from, when I say flat rate, I mean performance-based pay. They could still be hourly with a bonus based on hours sold, and we can't get into all the detail here. But let's say that the technician is making, just for grins, $23 an hour, and they're making $23 an hour, and they're making $23 an hour. So, of course, they're not getting the parts portion of that, but this technician at that number, those numbers could do $23.18. And by the way, I call this the power of team because this isn't just about an average and above average awesome technician. It is, but it's about an average and above average and awesome service advisor, an average and above average and awesome owner, an average above average and awesome shop. You could be an awesome tech working for a mediocre service advisor or vice versa. It's a team. It's when the team works together and we accomplish this because it takes productivity, efficiency, productivity, mainly management, efficiency, mainly the technician, but it does have to do with management as well, and bringing this all together. Look at what happens with the paycheck. They can almost double their pay. One other quick example. I had a fellow in California years ago. He said, I wanted to hire this technician. He's at a dealership. He's got the best reputation in town, and I wanted to hire him. My wife and I took him out for dinner, him and his wife, and we offered him $5 an hour more and thought he would come along, and he said he declined it. Why? And I said, because he could come to work for you and make $28 an hour, but you don't sell the time that the dealership did, and I'm making $5 an hour, but I'm still taking home smaller paychecks. Because technicians that are worth their weight in gold understand that how much you pay me per hour is important, but it's times how many hours. And I personally think that everybody, because you as a shop owner are performance-based paid, I think advisors should be performance-based paid, technicians, and I don't mean flat rate, that's not what I'm saying. We can take the amount that we pay them by the hour based on how many hours they bill out. So they're still getting paid for 168, but the more hours they bill out in the day. We don't have time to get into that. It's a whole discussion in itself. But the point is there's a lot that you could do with this particular spreadsheet. Now, with that done, I'm going to show you the next thing that I think makes a huge difference, and I'm going to turn it over to Kevin. And Kevin, I'm going to pull up the old gross profit calculator first. We're doing this a little bit differently than we did this afternoon. And so, Kevin, if you could introduce the concept of excuse me, I need to get some water here when you're talking, the concept of what a parts matrix is, and then I'm going to pull up my parts matrix, and you can show the old one first, and then we'll show the algorithmic one. Some of you took training from me years ago, and you saw this parts matrix. We used to have it on paper. Now it's a spreadsheet, and then I took that and made something even from good, and we made it great. We basically put our matrix on steroids. So, okay, Kevin?
Great. Once again, thank you, Kelly, for letting me contribute. what I like about the gross profit calculator, first off, it's not a gross markup, or it's gross profit. So what Kelly has put together here is that on the left-hand side, you'll see the purchase price. That's where what your acquisition cost when you're buying it from your parts vendor. So you would determine the purchase price, and from there, you would look on the left-hand side and you would decide, okay, I bought an item at $3, it would sell for $15. If I bought it for $3.01, let's go ahead and put that in just below the $3 purchase price at $3.01, then I would sell it for $12.04. Well, the gross profit calculator, what Kelly, when he created this, and they went, he's analyzed this and gone over, as I buy an item and my purchase price went by 1 penny, I gave up the different margins. So when I get into the sweet spot, which he's calculating here at $26.50, that is the sweet spot. And the way that the gross profit calculator is designed is to help you achieve a 50% gross profit margin. If you're part of the team, then we have higher goals, obviously, because we're pushing you all the time to get there. But what Kelly was just showing us, I didn't write that down, but basically, when I had a $3 purchase price, what it was selling for, my margin, I would have $15 would be the sell price. If I went to $3.01, it would be $12.04. Because as the prices increase, the margins are going to have to be compressed in order for us to be competitive in our market. So here, he's now he's moving along for the algorithmic parts matrix, which is to compensate for that fact that basically when I have an item that is $3.01, I don't want to lose that margin, and I'm going to have my profit dollar, and it's going to tell me my selling price is $15.04. So that 1 penny difference is going to make a difference in the profit dollars of what you're going to achieve. So what happens is, as the algorithmic parts matrix, the way he's designed this and did the math on it and realized that the first spreadsheet compared to the one that we're using now is as you're selling items that are below in the low margin range or the low dollar range, you need to be achieving 80% gross percentage points in order to be at the end of the month that you're going to be at 50%. Because if you have an engine or a transmission, you're going to be in a much higher ticket, therefore the margins are going to be more competitive with where you are now. So the purchase price of $645, for example, it's going to show you GP, profit in dollars, and then a total selling price. This probably fits in line with the way that you're calculating now. If you're taking your purchase price and you're timesing it by 1.5, you're timesing it by 1.67, and every single one, the benefit of this is an Excel spreadsheet that you can run side by side with what you're currently doing as you're entering in. And you can just enter one purchase price and it will automatically calculate. But it's going to give you the gross profit dollars and the percentage so that your margins are going to be good at the end of the month, because it's difficult to make it when you have a higher ticket item. The sweet spot that he had on the previous example of $26, it's very simple to find out what your sweet spot is. And what you'll find is at $26 or $26.50, you'll see there on line 17 and 18, that's the sweet spot. That's basically where, if you call your local parts store, they're going to be able to tell you your average ticket or your average purchase price. Those margins need to be consistent, and those are not going to be as price sensitive, right? Because those are items that you're buying and you're just going to turn around and sell, and you're going to calculate them at a competitive margin with what you're selling now. But where this tool becomes very valuable is the items that are below that sweet spot. You're only going to sell maybe 4 to 11% of your total purchases in the month, but it's going to make a huge difference at the end of the month when you're looking at your total number. So the algorithmic, what's great about this is that as you're putting in the price, it's just a simple concept. You put in, here's my purchase price, it automatically calculates for it, and you don't have to think about it. In the example Kelly has here, you can see at $1,300 was my purchase price. My margin is more compressed. As the dollars get higher, the margin needs to be more competitive because we will have to compete, and that emotional bank gets fulfilled where we're like, look, I can't get 80% on a $1,300 item. I have to be competitive. So the benefit of those two spreadsheets are that they're in an Excel format. Kelly's going to send you at least the first one. Kelly, you're going to send the second one as well?
Sorry, I muted myself. Yes, correct. I'm sending you both of them. That's complimentary with this session. Kevin, watching you do this was really neat because all of a sudden I saw this from Bob O'Connor's perspective, because when he was training back in the day, we didn't have the ability. We didn't even have laptops and PowerPoint. We had, transparencies. And now we've got these abilities to see this stuff. By the way, I just wanted to quickly show you. I'm trying to do this. There we go. And I just wanted to show you what Kevin looks like so you can see who you're talking to. A lot younger than me,
great.
that's for sure. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that up there. But yeah, I was just thinking about if Bob was watching this and seeing how much it's come a long way. I mean, it's come a long way in my lifetime, you know, going from transparencies to this. It's been incredible. But I was just thinking, you know, how impressed Bob would be to see the algorithmic concept of this. And again, the parts matrix works great. I mean, that's the way it works. A lower ticket item, higher gross profit, higher ticket item, lower gross profit. Because like Kevin just said, you're not going to get 80% gross profit on the tire. People aren't going to buy them. So you have to get a lower gross profit on those higher ticket items, but it is more money. But the problem we found was that when we went from that 1 cent increase, that was the problem, was that, and I'll bring that back up here, and I'm sending you both. The reason I'm sending you both is because I'm going to recommend, now you can build this into your software, and Kevin, if you can comment on that. One of the problems that I found training is I'd say, okay, we're going to talk about parts matrixing, and people say, oh, I've got one in my software. I think, okay. And then Kevin starts talking about it. And by the way, that shop I was in, Kevin, when I was in Vancouver, I'm looking at the spreadsheet and I said, oh my God, this is defaulting to list. Every single part was defaulting to list in the GemCar software. It wasn't GemCar, it was because he'd never been trained on how to do it. And I'd be in a class and say, oh yeah, we already have that down, our system does it. Well, I know a guy who sells software in Toronto, and I was showing him my new algorithmic calculator. He said, oh, come on, Kelly, he said, I sell software and we have it built into our system. And he brought it up in the screen in his training room where I was teaching, and he goes, oh, he said, we're not seeing it the way that I thought we were seeing it. So here's even a guy who sells software. So Kevin, do you want to talk to that? And then I'll come back to this. Go ahead.
Great. And so as somebody who sells software and trains on software, your perception is that you have a gross profit calculation, whatever it may be. You might call it something different. You're doing it. If you say you have that, the only way you know that is if you've done it in the last 90 days and you verified it against something else. And the reason I'm saying that is because I sell software, I train on software, and I talk with, oh yeah, well, XYZ software has always done that for years. And I say, really, show me. I'm going to use Kelly's gross profit calculator. I start with something simple, put it in as a dollar amount. Here's the selling price. What's the gross profit dollars? What's the margin? So because you believe that that is the case, I assure you, trust but verify. And then normally what I'll say is when you say that, show me. And the reason being is because depending on the database when it was installed, depending on the download that happened, depending on who was the last person in there playing around, maybe they thought it was too high. Their emotional bank was, they were too invested. It was their mother-in-law. They had to make an adjustment and they didn't realize they could adjust the one-time price. So they adjusted your parts matrix. Now all of a sudden, everything that sells in that sweet spot is calculated at a 20% margin. So when you say that it's there, I believe you, but when you say that, show me. What do you mean? And these tools right here are to help you calibrate your gross profit calculator inside of your software. The algorithmic is the best. It's the most powerful because it's simple. Just, and Kelly's going to talk about the difference between the gross profit calculator. You have to search for the purchase price to put the number in there. It's not that difficult, but if we want to make it consistent, so when every time a customer calls, we have a system in place, and this is how we do it. We don't need to have them trying to find, okay, if I was rushed, I put $28 where it was $45, or I moved here, I moved there. The algorithmic, he tightened it up. He spent a little more time on the development of it. Now you just put the price in, boom, it automatically calculates it. So.
Thank you for commenting about changing it. I was in a fellow shop. I won't mention the name of the software that he uses, but I said, do you have a matrix? He said, oh yeah, I've got a matrix. And I learned that somebody who thinks they have a matrix who doesn't have a matrix is more dangerous than somebody who doesn't even know what a matrix is. Because if I'm talking about a matrix and you have a matrix, you think, oh, we don't have to listen to that because we already have one. Or I'm going to go have a cigarette. And then realize that, oh, you don't have a matrix. So he said, I've got a matrix. And I looked at his software. I said, no. It's defaulting everything to 40. I know a fellow who had GemCar. He thought it had a matrix. It was defaulting everything to 40. And so he said, oh, I can change that. I'll make it 50. Well, it still isn't working properly. Because when you do 50% gross profit in a tire, you go, oh, that's too much. You bring it down. You've got an engine. You think, oh, that's too much. I bring it down. Well, if you bring it down because you need to, but you never go above 50 to get it to 80 or 75 or 70 or whatever, you can't get 50. If you sell half of what you sell at 50 and everything else less than 50, how can you get it exceeding 50? You can't. And that's the whole concept of a matrix. You need to get a higher gross profit on lower ticket items because you can't get a higher gross profit on the higher ticket items. And as Kevin mentioned, one of the issues with this spreadsheet, and it was good, but now it's great, okay? You had to go down to that specific line. And what Kevin had mentioned, it went from 80% down to 75. That's the concept of a matrix. It needs to go down as the price goes up. But that 1 cent difference, because you bought the part for 1 cent more, the inventor increased it by 1 cent, and now you went from making $15 to $12.04. So now what allows you to happen is, and by the way, I hired somebody to put together the spreadsheet who's actually even more anal retentive than Tom Ham, who's online here. Tom, it's great to have you on the call. I have huge respect for you, sir. I said, you know what I'd like? Could you do this matrix to go from 80% down to 79.5 and then 79 and then 88 or 98.5. Well, he's extremely analytical or anal retentive, as they call it. And of course, Bob O'Connor was definitely anal retentive, but he went down from 79 to 79.99, 79.98, 79.97. So literally in the background, you have tens of thousands of calculations operating in the background. Now, with most shop management systems, you can take the matrix that I just showed you and put it into your system. It has, I think, 11 lines of data. Some systems only have 10, so you have to make a little bit of an adjustment there. But for how long this takes, and again, this is nice because you don't have to go down to the specific line. All you need to do is put it into one line. So you bought a part for $56, and it's better than the last calculator because it's not going down at 5%. In this case, it's telling you, it's giving you 49.85. It shows you the profit in dollars. The last one didn't do that, and it shows you the selling price instantaneously. So I bought the part for $56. I got 49.85%. I made $55.67, and I sell it for $111.67. So again, I'm sending both of those to you. If you've got a shop management system and you're familiar with how to go in and change the matrix, I want to encourage you to do that. And then, excuse me, but if you want to use the algorithmic one, you can't really put that into a shop management software. It's extremely complex, and so what I want to encourage you to do is to, I'm just pulling up a different spreadsheet here. I want to encourage you to use the matrix on your computer. Just have it on your hard drive desktop as an Excel spreadsheet. Okay, I want to move on along here. Thank you, Kevin. This is what I believe the minimum that you should know. Back to the GPS. Where am I? Where should I be? How do I get there? So this tool, I use it to teach what the benchmarks are. Of course, there's more training involved when it gets to how do you get from where you are to where you need to be. I wanted to show you an example of a one-man shop. And this is a real shop. In May of 2016, they did $11,797 in labor, and they parts the $13,000. Now, if you showed me your financial statements, so the very first time, I've never seen your statements before, the first thing I look at is your labor sales and your part sales. I want to see what are you selling. And I can tell you when I ran the management groups in Canada, all across the country, literally from Vancouver Island to Newfoundland, literally, and I would look at income statements and I'd say, wow, parts are higher, parts are higher, parts are higher. Parts should never exceed your labor sales. Now, on an individual job, when you sold the transmission, yeah, but at the end of the month, the end of the quarter, the end of the year, labor should drive your business. You sell labor without parts. Hardly ever do you sell parts without labor. Labor gross profit is higher than that of parts. So you should see more money from what you sell the most of for the highest gross profit. The problem is it's easier to sell a part than it is to sell labor. And I guess the question is, how much work have you done that you didn't get paid for? How many times did it take 2 hours and you thought it shouldn't have taken more than an hour, so you charged the customer an hour? Or you quoted the customer 1 hour, but you didn't realize that the car was rusted to the nines, or that it had been abused, or that it had rust all over the place. And it took longer, but you don't want to charge the customer more because you quoted them less. And so we stick with that. It's a lot easier to give away time. 10 minutes here, 15 minutes there. Most shops are not going to lend you a tool. You don't go into a shop as a complete stranger and say, can I borrow a tool? People say, I don't let people borrow my tools. Great. But have you ever let them borrow you? 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there. Can you look at my car? What I call the PLO. The PLO, we see PLOs. Kevin, in your career, you must have seen hundreds and hundreds, thousands of PLOs. PLO is the parking lot opinion. It's when the car gets to the shop and out comes the owner of the shop usually, or maybe a technician, and they got their head under a hood or under a dash in the parking lot, and they're doing a parking lot opinion rather than starting with a repair order, an invoice, getting it into the bay and getting all that information and getting paid for it. My goal for you is really simple: to get paid for everything you do at the right amount of money. Now, this shop is actually doing pretty good at $30,000, and I am sending the spreadsheet to you, and this is the minimum that you should know. Some people that are on this call don't even see this information, and other people at a whole totally different level. But this is, if you're not seeing this kind of data, I want to encourage you to start with this. You can create your what you would call the income statement analysis tool, ISAT. For those of you that know John Waffler helped me put this together way back years ago. This shop did $30,000 with one technician without an advisor. That's pretty amazing. And now up here, you're going to put in your how many months it is, and it'll calculate the monthly amount. Now, these are going to be the same because it's 1 month. But when you put it up here as 12 months, it'll take your data that you put in for the year and show you what it is for the month. The ratios are really important. 39% of the money that came into his door came from labor. That should be 50 to 55%. So he has a labor leak, no question. 45% of the money came from parts. I don't need to look at the rest of that. We see the cost of labor. Just to be clear here, this is something that Bob taught that I think is the absolute best way to look at it, is labor is a cost of goods sold. Labor is not an expense. And I would safely say that at least 85, if not 90% of shops have their technicians' wages, excuse me, as an expense, not a cost of goods sold. But every single day you buy parts, you mark them up. Every single day you buy labor, you mark that up. I know what I collected in labor. I should know what I paid for the labor. And for the record, that's direct wages only. It does not include any of the payroll benefits or burdens. And then over here, it's calculating for you what your gross profit is. The gross profit on the labor is 67%, which is not too bad. He paid himself as a technician. We saw cost of goods sold, excuse me, $3,849. We see what he paid for the parts, etc. So as labor GP, he's left with 67% after he paid himself for being a technician. His parts gross profit's only 43%. We definitely want 50. His sublet is really good, 59%. I actually said to this guy, I said, hey, why don't you just, shut down and call it Sublets or Us and sublet all the work, because you know how to sell sublet better than you know how to sell your own labor. My God, do I ever sound like Bob O'Carter there? When people would say to Bob, oh, I've been doing this for 15 years. Well, you've been doing it for 15 years and you still haven't figured it out? You've been doing this for 3 generations and you still haven't figured it out? Good old Bob. Well, he shouldn't be selling tires at 6%, that's for sure, but he said it's very competitive. Shop supplies, you don't have to track that as a cost of goods sold. For the record, you put your labor rate in here. His labor rate's 105. There's one technician, which is just him. And by the way, this is a fellow who's been taking training from me for at least 15 years. He's up there as far as a person who's taken more training than anybody else, but he's not been able to get a full-time advisor. He's not been able to keep another technician. I know this guy personally. He's an amazing individual, great guy, great technician. He takes training. I don't know a person who has more certificates on his wall for training than this guy. He goes to every technical class, and I mean every one. And I'd go back to Toronto, and I knew he was going to be at the 3-day class or the 5-day class or the 2-day class or the evening session. He was there, but his implementation wasn't good. Now he's in a management group that I have, the online management group, and I'm riding him, and he needs that. That's what he needs. I said, his name's Tony. I said, Tony, if I saw you sign up for another class, I would decline. If you buy another webinar of mine and I get a PayPal thing that says you bought training, I'm not going to take your money. You've taken time management, you've taken employee management, you've taken all the stuff. Your issue is the implementation. And now for the first time, he has a full-time advisor. Her name's Michelle, and I coached her yesterday. She's on board. She's also a bookkeeper. And I'm looking at now his numbers, they're increasing because why? He doesn't have to answer every phone call. I mean, as a technician, if you don't have an advisor, how often can you work on a car to completion without one single interruption? The answer is never. He wrote 82 repair orders. He was open 20 days, and you fill in how many hours in a day. Now, that's not fair because he's not there 8 hours in a day. As a self-employed person, you're not doing 8 hours a day, 9, 10, 11, 12, whatever hours a day. It's amazing what you can get done at 10 o'clock at night when nobody's there to bother you, or 2 o'clock in the morning. You can get a lot of hours billed because the phone's not ringing. And yet the next day you're completely bagged because you didn't get enough sleep. We all know that deal. Anyway, the key performance indicators, these are the minimum that you should know. His overall gross profit is 49%, so that's where he is, the GPS. Where are you? Benchmark, where should he be? 60%. He's 11% low there, so we need to focus on overall GP. How do we do that? Well, his labor gross profit's only 67%. The benchmark for people in training is 75. In our groups, we want to see 70. Our training, our groups, I should say, we want to see 75. So he's 3% or low there, really 8% because he's now in a group. We're a little harder on group members, as Bob would have taught. The parts GP, I'm not impressed. 43% is not good. He's selling some stuff at list. By the way, I saw his more current information, and he's now much closer to 50% because he's using the matrix. He has it on his computer. He uses it as a standalone spreadsheet. He's using antiquated DOS-based software. Kevin, you and I were on the phone with him a while back. He's still using DOS-based software with zero support, but he's smart enough to use the matrix so that he's now increased his gross profit on his parts. In our management groups, we want to see 50% gross profit, so he's 2% low if he's in training and 7% low being in a group. His labor mix is only 39%. Only 39% of the money that came in the door came from labor. It should be at least 50. In our management groups, we want 55. So he's got a labor leak like most shops do. His hourly revenue, $267, which isn't too bad. If he sold all of the hours that he was there, he could have done $16,800. The labor sold was $11,797. He only sold 70% of his time. Our goal is to sell 112% of the time, so he's 42% short. So the biggest problem at this shop is the labor leak. His average repair order size 367. He's working on, he doesn't have a car count problem. When you're a single tech working on 4 cars a day, that's not a car count problem. He's not doing too badly here. 1.4 hours per repair order. Our benchmark is 3. The average shop's 1.2. And just for the record, when you start to use this, if you're not using something like this, I'm going to encourage you not to fill in the expenses. You can do this really quickly, fill in your sales, your cost of goods sold, and literally taking the data, whether it's from your income statement, shop management system, whatever it is that you get the data from, maybe your accountant, fill this in, and in 5 to 10 minutes a month, you're going to be able to see this. I had a fellow in the class when we did this last week, 2 weeks ago, my 55th birthday, March 21st, and he sent me a message at chat. He said, I've been doing this every single month for 3 years since you taught it to me. To see this data is the minimum that you should see, and again, back to the GPS, where am I, where should I be? Now, I wasn't going to show this other spreadsheet. I didn't show it in this afternoon's class, but I'm going to, I want to show it here, and it's, and you know why? It's because, Tom, I've got you online, and I really would like to show you another idea that I had. And you know, Kevin, you've been I love getting together with Kevin. I get together with Kevin, we're bouncing off the walls, we share information with each other, we learn from each other. I was doing that class in Ottawa, and I got him to take over, and I'm sitting there thinking, oh my God, that's awesome, I wish I knew that before. And anyway, he told me that I'm a creative person, and I never really perceived myself to be a creative person, because I thought creativity was, you know, how to do graphic artists and artwork and stuff. But for those of you that are online that are kings of things like Tom Ham, I'm actually almost intimidated that you're online, but that's okay. I wouldn't have wanted to have you in my first class, right? Somebody who's that far advanced. But I was sitting in my living room one day and I thought, okay, we talk about the power of team and what your sales should be per month. But I asked myself these questions. What should the gross profit be per technician per month? What should the sales be per technician per month? What should the cost of goods sold be for a technician per month? How much of a technician's sales that we have could go to service advisor's salary, and how much could go to manage it? And I was asking all these questions, and I came up with this idea, and I hired somebody who does spreadsheets, and I said, here's what I want. And so we take the sales, and we did it from the last calculator, and let's do $45,000 a month, okay? Because there's a lot of people on this call that can get close to $45,000 a month. Number of available hours would be 168 per technician. I'm doing this differently than I've done before. We'll do it with a simple $100 an hour labor rate. It's probably the average of people on the call. So if your sales are $45,000 a month and you've got a technician per tech, 168 hours in a month, and your labor rate's 100, your labor sales should be about 16,800. Your part sales should be approximately, okay, by the way, I should have left that blank. And so what I wanted to see here is the labor sales. To go along with that, the part sales should be approximately 12,000. When I first started training with Bob, we said that the labor to parts ratio was 50-50. Half the money should come from labor, the other half should come from parts. That was many years ago. It was in the 90s. Well, today, because we do more diagnostics and more inspections, etc., before we work on a car, we spend a lot more time on the labor portion. And so that amount should be higher. So labor sales per month for a technician should be about 16,800. The parts sales to go along with that should be about 12,000. But when you add the shop supplies, the towing, the environmental fees, all of the other things that you sell, tires, etc., that should be about $2,923 on average. So the shop did $32,000 in sales in a month. Now, the reason this is lower is because the labor rate in some cases, like I mentioned, is higher, like with Scott. But what I wanted to see is how much could you pay your technicians to see a 70% gross profit. So if your sales were $32,000 a month, you could pay your technician $46.20 a month. Your labor gross profit after you paid for the tech. Now it doesn't include payroll benefits or burdens. We're looking at that separately. And then the price of parts go along with that should be about $6,216 in parts gross profit. So the total gross profit per month per technician should be about $19,000. Then a portion of that, approximately 10%, is our benchmark to go to management salary. So $3,200 of that from that sales of that technician could go to your manager, and $2,572 as a service advisor. Now we're not talking about paying your service advisor $2,500, but that's per technician. And then maybe you're going to hire a new technician, which was part of that. What if you go from 1 technician to 2, and you're going to have to get a bigger facility, or you're going from 5 technicians to 7, or whatever it is? You want to see, can I afford the extra money for the rent that it's going to cost me for a bigger building? And the answer is you got $1,600 a month per technician to be able to spend on rent. And then what about advertising? I'm going to have to advertise more. I'm going to have to spend more money to get more customers in the door, get them back more often, to keep the new technicians busy. And so you can see that there's more money available for advertising. And then you have about $12,000 per technician per month for all of the other expenses, and still giving you the benchmark of the 20%. So what you can do in here is you can go with 3 technicians and how many hours that is, and the same labor rate. And then you could see with your shop, you simply fill in your numbers up here. What could your labor sales be a month with 3 technicians? What could your part sales be? You should be able to do about just under $100,000 a month with 3 technicians. Your salaries for your advisors could be $13,800. Your labor gross profit would be $36,000. Parts gross profit $18,000. Your overall gross profit $57,000. Oh, I love this stuff. If you showed me a wiring diagram, I'd be completely lost. But this stuff I eat up. Management salary 10%. Again, we're down to the same net profit of 20%. Anyway, I wanted to show that to you. I didn't get into it this afternoon, but I had Tom online. I wanted to show some little extra thing with that. Anyway, so income statement analysis tool, I'm sending you that. I'm sending you that calculator that I just showed you. Then I want to show you one more thing, and that is, this is not kindergarten stuff. This is stuff that is geared for somebody who's really on their numbers. I was asked by a major parts company up here in Canada if I could do management training with them, but also management groups. And they said, what kind of stuff do you track? And I was running WorldPack groups in the US, and I introduced this particular composite to them. Back in the day, Bob O'Connor's was awesome, but you know, it was antiquated now because it was years ago. And this is phenomenal. I had the idea with this, and I paid somebody. I bought it from them actually. But this is the best composite I've seen of all the 6 or 7 that I've worked with. What I love about this particular composite is you get a chance to see your shop month after month after month. And just for the record, this is for our management groups. It's not a spreadsheet I sent to you because it is for the group, but I want to show you ultimately where you're headed to. And the parts company in Canada looked at this, and the lady who is running the marketing department, very, very smart lady, her name's Linda, and she said to me, she said, wow, this is overkill. I said, no, it's not. And she said, oh yeah, she said, most people, this is beyond them. I said, exactly. That's what we're talking about here. If you come to me and you want to join a management group and I show you just the income statement analysis tool and you go, wow, I already see that in my shop management system, most of it anyway, or maybe more than that. What I want to see is much more data. And just for the record, and when I scroll down, my microphone will cut out, so I'll stop talking when I scroll down. This is 176 lines of financial data. And for you, it may be overkill. I don't know. Some of you are used to this stuff. Some people seeing it for the first time. But I wanted to show you the ultimate goal, the where are you, the GPS. Where should we be? What should we know? And we want to know ultimately, this is the information. Start with ISAT, get yourself to this eventually. But what you want to be able to see is where your shop is in all of these areas. We track new customers in a month, and we can see the shop. This is a real shop. This was 2015. It was a WorldPAC group, just so you know, down in California. 45 new customers, 35, 47, 52, 56, and then 64 in August. Well, this guy was in a management group, and you think 64 customers, how did you get 64 new customers in a month? That's amazing. And so that person tells you how they did that. And everybody's king or queen of something. So somebody else has, well, this guy's got a really healthy quick ratio. I get that in financial management training. He doesn't have much money in receivables, which is great. Anyway, I'm not going to get into every line of this, but what you want to see is a lot more data. In this case, I don't consider it overkill. I look at this data and I think, wow, when shops get together and they're sharing information with one another and you get to see your trending. And then I do want to show you what we look at in our actual, our groups as well. Sorry, Kevin, can you just talk for a minute? My voice is going against me here.
Sure.
Just do me a favor, without mentioning the name of the shop, but you were talking to me about the fellow that was doing training in California, and if you could just mention that, I'd appreciate it, then I'll move on.
So I'm working with a customer that is, he's subscribing to management training, and one of the things that, you know, he's implemented a new shop management software, and it's mine. It happens to be, I'm blessed enough to be working with him, and so GemCar, and I'm teaching him how to use it, the punch clock, go through how to create parts and parts matrix and all the different things. And he has a, you know, a weekly commitment that he has to make sure that he's reporting his data, like what his sales are. And he's a smaller shop. He's just he's up and coming. He's getting going. It was basically him 6 months ago, and now he's hired another technician. So there's two techs, him and another tech, and he's talking about a service advisor. And he's working through like the whole idea of what a management training is going to do for him. And, you know, I spoke with him, and I'm so happy that I think any training that we all take, no matter what it is, right? If it's weight loss, if it's a gym membership that we're going to go, but the dollar amounts that he's spending on this management training, and he doesn't know his numbers. He doesn't know what his break-even points are, how to get there. The GPS that Kelly's talking about, I was a little taken back, and I'm not going to say the name of the company because it's not germane to this discussion. But the idea would be, when you get information or you're required, you know, somebody tells you they need the information, it's really helpful to be able to have somebody help you understand it so that you know the beginning points. Like, okay, I now know what my effective billing rate is. It makes sense because Kelly talked about it. And it's just a matter of bringing along people. So the group, you know, that he is involved with, he's traveling and he's going 8 days at a time away from his business. And as I mentioned, he's becoming very affected by that because he's a one-man operation. Until recently, he became a 2.5-man operation. So he's gone for 8 days in a month to be able to get training and go through it. And the money that he's spending on it, I shake my head and say, wow, I think we really could focus you a little more on just knowing your own numbers before you worry about, you know, comparing yourself to somebody else or what key performance indicators that they're suggesting a shop of your size are. And, you know, Kelly's, it's very pragmatic. I mean, I'm looking at the CFAT, I call it, right? So it's the composite. And the benefit of this is that you get a snapshot every month of how you're doing, and you just hover the mouse, it tells you what to put in here. So it's not like you have to have a weight coach to walk you through it. It's like, okay, well, what is this number? Well, this is where your salaries are and what you put in here. So this way you're going to get your real life numbers, and this would be the goal, right, Kelly? I mean, that's what we're talking about, is that
Ultimately,
start
yes.
simple, make it easy. Yeah, you know, start simple so that at least you know where you're at.
What bothered me about, and I'm not going to mention the name of the company, I'm not trying to run down the competition. I have a problem when something works, but the dollars that are spent, and that guy's spending $399 a week with a 3-year commitment. And I'm not saying it doesn't work. I know that stuff works, and there's another company that does something similar, but I know people that are $40, $50, $60, $70,000 into these companies, and I'm not saying it doesn't work. One of my favorite people who knows Bob O'Connor really well was on my website the other day, because the recording of this from a couple weeks ago is actually on my website. You can watch it. I'm going to send you this recording anyway, but he was in Bob O'Connor's group way back in the day, and he saw what I was doing. He said, Kelly, he said, you're bringing a really financial I'm trying to remember the word he said. He said, you're making it affordable for people who've not been able to pay for this before. Now, I'm not trying to be the cheapest guy in town with groups. That's not what I'm saying. But we have some advantages. We're not talking about traveling all the time. This is an online group, something that I really wanted to do. So, sorry, I was just looking at a comment from Tom, but it was too small on the other screen, my small 27-inch monitor. The cost of running a management group is huge because you're renting hotel rooms for how many days a month, and you're paying for meals and hotels and all that expensive stuff and airfare and travel. Well, in this particular case, we do an online group. And by the way, it's something we wanted to do with WorldPack. We talked about it. We launched groups with WorldPack, and they still exist today. I love it. This was a group that we did with WorldPack in front of you. You don't see the shop names, you just see the numbers. But we launched a group in California. We launched a group in Northwest, which was Seattle. We launched a group in Denver. Those groups still exist today. Somebody else took over for me when I came back to work up in Canada. And I love to see that they're still running. People get into a group and all of a sudden it revolutionizes their life. And again, there's the two things. I was thinking, what is the difference between the first shop I saw in Vancouver and the 5 shops that I took Terry to? What was the difference in that training session that I was with Kevin? And I mean, constantly learning. Learning is a phenomenal thing, right? And I'm thinking there's two things. You know your numbers and you're part of a group. And there's lots of groups. I'm not saying you have to be part of our group. Get into a group. Some people in this call are in a group, and that's awesome. It's one thing to see how well you're doing month after month after month. The trending that I just showed you, and you see what's happening with your car count, you see what's happening with your productivity, you see what's happening with your effective labor rate, and something's getting better, but something's falling off, and so you start to focus on that, and you never arrive. You're always working on something and getting better and better. That's the exciting part of running a business. Then you get into a management group and you start to see how you're doing compared to somebody else. And as I mentioned, everybody's king or queen of something. Now this is a bit more dated. This was August of 2011. I've been running groups for quite some time. Actually started on my birthday in Vancouver in 1996, I guess it was, when I took over Bob's group. But now you're seeing how you're doing with these calculations. And again, we've got a 2-hour session here. We can't get into all of the fixes for this stuff, but we look at receivables, and you've got 290, and then you've got this shop. What are you doing? You got $22,000 in receivables. Well, you know, every customer's got a story, and he's way too nice. He was letting people pick up their car, and then the next thing you know, you're chasing old money. And I tell you, this is dated, and I don't even know why it says 2000. Yeah, yes, it was 2011. Sorry, it seems so long ago. They say the days go by slowly, but the years go by quickly. But I know that shop, and he's doing far better now. His receivables aren't anywhere near that. He thought that's the best way to run the business. The rest of this is pretty straightforward. How many days open? I apologize, I didn't mean to do that. Anyway, technicians on staff paid hours. But here's what it calculates for us. We get to see repair orders per day, so now you start to see car count. Now, just so you know, this particular shop, I know him personally. He does air care, or like a smog program, so he does a lot of those, and so that's why he sees a lot of cars, and his average invoice is a lot smaller because he's doing it the hard way, lots of car count. Whereas you've got this shop, the average dollars per repair order is 609. I do want to say that this is a WorldPack group, so we're talking about people who were working on import vehicles. Some of these were BMW only, some of them, a couple of them were, some were on Mercedes, etc. So that's why we're seeing a lot higher dollars for some of these shops. In California, just so you know, the shop was actually in Nevada, so they were in our Calvada group. We see the sold hours per repair order. Look at this guy. Get it in, get it out, get it in, get it out, get it in, get it out. I mean, it's okay for him. Look at the dollars that he's doing. He's doing $70,000, but you've got this shop doing $75,000 where this shop's doing 70. And this guy's got the heart. You can, by the way, just so you know, when you get into this, it can become extremely addictive. You look at this and look at that and look at this. And anyway, as I mentioned before, my favorite calculation is actually what is the effective labor rate. So we see that this shop's labor rate is $116.40. The effective labor rate was actually $100.53 for that particular month. This is a month. So we're not comparing January, February, March, April. We're looking at every shop, in this case for August of 2011. So they were collecting 86% of their labor rate that month. This shop was collecting 110. So yes, you can collect more than what you say your labor rate is. This shop is only at 66%. This shop's at 107. This guy didn't know how to calculate it, put something in wrong in the spreadsheet. But the effective labor rate to me is the most important calculation of them all. And then all you do, of course, you put, I shouldn't say all, but you fill in your labor and it does your gross profit, etc. Anyway, I'm not going to spend more time on that. I just wanted to give you an idea of where we ultimately should be headed. And again, I want to encourage you, if you're not tracking the stuff, that you start, excuse me, with the ISAP thing. I'm going to be sending that to you. Excuse me, I wish my throat wasn't like this, but it just happens as a trainer. You need to talk even when you've got, I had to do it one time with strep throat. So I'm just going to bring you back, and we're going to be ending here shortly, and then I'm going to open it up to questions. Back to the big picture. I do like to come back to big picture instead of, just focusing on the details. There are two things that separate what I've seen from phenomenal shops in my 30-year career and shops that just do okay. I had a fellow, so sad, he took one class, just one class, and he sent me an email and said, Kelly, this is March and I'm trying to pay my credit card bill from January. And I know he's just way too nice. He's got a receivables problem. His labor rate's too low. He's not using the parts gross profit calculator. He's just kind of eking by and getting by and trying to pay his bills, etc. And then you've got other people that can send their entire staff to Vegas because they want to reward them for doing $53,000 in a month per technician. I just want to show you the two options that we have for you to be able to do those two things in a better way, the financials. I have what I call a GPS financial management online course. It's a 5-part course. This is not going to be a long commercial. I just want to explain to you what we've done here. It's something that we've recorded. Kevin and I have been working on this for the last couple of months. And the first part of that is an introduction to financial management. And Kevin, you really helped me understand when you're talking to people about software, about the chart of accounts. And a lot of people don't understand the chart of accounts. I see some people, the chart of accounts is way too detailed. It's overkill. And some people, it's minimal. We show you what we believe is the best chart of accounts to have for your sales, your cost of goods sold, etc. And so in that session, I go through the chart of accounts, how to streamline that to better understand your financial management. And in that session, we introduce you to some key performance indicators. We have you complete your first ISAT in that training. You do it whenever you want. It's online. You can watch it whenever you want. By the way, when I send you the link to this training, I'm also going to send you a short webinar that I put together on how to download webinars to your hard drive. Now, for the purpose of this, it could be anything from YouTube and some other sites as well, not all of them, but I'm going to show you in a quick webinar how to take all of these webinars that we teach, including this one, and you can download it to your hard drive. So it's a very short little 5-minute instructional thing. Some people know how to download, some people don't, when it comes to things off YouTube. And just so you know, what I decided to do with this is not just have it so that it's training, because it's about implementation. I want to see the implementation. So one of the things you do after you take that is you do your own income statement analysis tool. You send it to me, and then we have a conversation. There's coaching that happens in between sessions, and now we review your income statement. It'll be myself usually, or Kevin as well. And then when we see your first income statement, say, okay, now let's move on to step 2, which is the Profit Builder software. And this is where we take a look at a lot more detail in some of these areas. And this is not a spreadsheet, just so you know. It's an actual working executable file. It's actually a software package. And I introduce you to the Profit Builder, and you go through that and you fill in your own Profit Builder, and you start to see your benchmarks, and it calculates things like break even per day, break even for your shop. It calculates your technician time per minute value, your labor potential, your parts potential, goes through all of those things. And in that session, I introduce you to 24 key performance indicators. So we started off with maybe a dozen in ISAT. Now we step you up to about 24. And then your action plan is we want to see you complete your Profit Builder software, and then you need to show what your data was when you did that. And then the next one, I have this out of order, sorry, I get into training on how to actually do all those calculations, all 24 of them. That's the third one. And then the fourth one is training on the balance sheet. And I find a lot of people don't pay attention to the balance sheet, and it can be a huge problem. It is really the big picture of a business. Give you an example, I had a fellow who was in a management group up here in Canada. He was doing similar something to ISAT, and he said, I know I'm making money. I see a bottom line profit, but have you ever had your accountant say you made $24,000 last month in net? And you say, well, show me the money because I'm overdrawn on my bank account. Show me the money. I actually wrote a workshop for CarQuest years ago called Show Me the Money. Yeah, I made money, but it's not on my bank account. And this guy's name's Peter, not the same Peter I mentioned earlier. And I said, tell you what, this is in fax days. I said, fax me your balance sheet. He said, I never look at that. And he faxed me his balance sheet, and I pull it off the fax machine on fresh paper, Kevin. It was fresh. It wasn't backwards. And I looked at it, and I was stunned how much debt he had. And I phoned him. I said, Peter, I'm stunned you're still in business. Like, you've got $98,000 in credit card debt in this business. That doesn't show up in the income statement. He said, do you think I'm going to make it? And I said, Peter, I'm going to tell you, hardly ever have I said this to somebody, but the hole's too deep. And he did. He shut down the shop, and he moved on. And I think he's selling software or something like that. I don't know what he's doing. But the point is, he's not in business anymore because he wasn't paying attention to the balance sheet. And there's things that you see in a balance sheet that you don't see in the income statement. So in that session, what I did is I said, here's what your income statement shows. Here's what it does not show. And I show you what doesn't show up there that you need to see, and that's in the balance sheet. And then there's the whole cash flow. And so I introduced the cash flow. And then I take you through every one of the 24 KPIs, GPS. Where am I? Here's how to calculate it. You do it manually. It's like in school with math. A lot of us hated math in school, but you remember when you got the right answer, and then you got your test back and you got half marks because you didn't show your work. Some people haven't heard that since they were a kid in school. You didn't show your work. Well, I don't understand it, but I do have the right answer. And they were onto something. These math teachers were onto something. If you didn't show your work, what they were saying is you don't understand what you're doing here. And for those of you that are in management groups back in the day, for example, with Bob O'Connor's groups, the math was complex for some people, and they'd look at it and they'd go, but how is this calculated? And if you don't know how to do it manually first, then how do you do it electronically or understand when the numbers are given to you? And Kevin, you saw that day in Ottawa where I took people through 24 calculations. Here's a real financial statement for a shop. Here's how to calculate what this calculation is. Where are they at? Where should they be? And then how do they get there? And we spent the whole day going through one calculation after another after another. And at the end, I said to somebody, could you come up here? It was a young lady. I said, could you come up here? I want to show you something. And I showed income statement analysis tool, and she was able to do it all within, what, 5 or 10 minutes, Kevin, something like that? And people are looking, well, why didn't you give us that this morning? Because if I gave you that and showed you the answers, you don't know how the math is done. But now, when you look at effective labor rate, you know how to calculate it. You've done it. You know what the labor to parts ratio is. You know what these calculations are because you've done them. So that's what that is it takes you through all 24. You look at a real financial statement. You do the calculation. You see where the shop's at. Then you say where it is. And then, of course, the training is how to get you there. And so the homework after that one is to complete all the 24Ks. And then the fifth one is the detailed composite training. And so if you do get the 5-part GPS financial management class, you get that composite that I showed you. Not the group one that shows you comparison with other shops. So it doesn't make sense to send that because you want to see your own shop in that particular case. But the homework after that is to complete your own session. Anyway, I'm not going to do a commercial on this, just to let you know, all 5-part series. It shows you all the things that are included there. And it's $450. It's Canadian dollars. So if you're Americans, that's probably about 15 cents, something like that these days. Well, not quite. It's probably 400. But anyway, and it includes coaching. And I like the fact that you get coaching. There's going to be 1 hour with myself individually and 2 hours with Kevin. Kevin brings an expertise to this that I don't have. And then the second part of that is the whole group membership. And as I mentioned, training is about financial management. The 2 things you need to know is be on your game with your numbers. You start with ISAT. You get yourself up to the composite with 174 lines. And then you start to compare with one another. And I won't read all this to you. I'm going to send you this PowerPoint. But what we've decided to do with the group, and Kevin and I put this together, is when you go to training, like I mentioned with Bob O'Connor's, and this is not a dig against training. I love training. Training's awesome. I've seen people come to a 5-day class and help revolutionize their shop. But I've come to the conclusion, thinking through this whole thing, that training should be a series of sprints, not a marathon. Learning shouldn't be learning as much as you can and then going out and doing something. It's about line after line, precept upon precept, to quote that. It's about doing a little bit here and a little bit there in a series of sprints. So what we did is we put together this program that what I now call Take 90. And Take 90 simply means that 90 minutes a week you commit to working on your business, not just in the business, but on the business. And I wanted to involve the advisors. One of the things that I look back at all of the groups is not one of them focused on helping the advisor. And I thought, wouldn't it be neat if a service advisor could have their own composite? Kevin, can you just briefly talk about the difference between the service advisor composite? I just got to grab some water here. And then we're going to be done in just about 5 minutes, and I'll turn it over to questions.
Great. So one of the things that we really are excited about is in my previous vocation as well as where I am today, the owner-operator can get really excited about it. Looking at the data analysis that we were talking about, 176 lines, there's some spaces and some percentages that carry out there. But when we include our service advisors, there's 65 lines that they have a direct relationship to what they can help us move the needle. It has to do with number of pre-booked appointments, number of ROs that we're at, how many estimates, what's the closing ratio. So our service advisors, we put together out of those 176 lines of data, we tightened it up and we made, so we're not sharing your financial data, what your management salaries are and the owner's interest and the equity share of the company. But for service advisors, they become a valuable tool in helping us move forward. And we meet with them on a bi-weekly basis so that we can tell them, hey, everybody's the king and queen of something. So now all of a sudden our service advisors are helping move forward. How many times have you gone to a training seminar, or you've gone and you saw a program, or you read a book and you're all excited about it, and you come back to work and you hand the book to the service advisor or the service manager and you say, listen, we need to adapt these policies and procedures. That's going to revolutionize our business. So it's so difficult when you're carrying the water. You're the inventor, the creator, the door opener, the closer, the financial manager. You have all these different hats, and you have personnel that are on your payroll. So what we've done is we've put a financial tool together just for the service advisor so that they're part of the solution. They are now responsible for their share, and they're sharing with other like-minded service advisors, and we have a portal. So if all of a sudden they have inspection sheets that they like, or they have an intake process that they're doing that really revolutionizes. One of the examples Kelly and I were talking about was we need to start talking to our customers in the way that our customers want to be spoken to. An example of that would be if all of a sudden autonomous cars, electronic automobiles are going to start showing up at our shops. We need to be proactive in how we're going to be handling those cars that just make their way to our shop. What are we doing here? You're not here for 60K, 70K, whatever the service is. We need to understand our business model, and by helping our service advisors share as they experience these first time, or they have a sheet, now they become part of the solution and they're sharing with the owner operator. And Kelly and I are going to be there to help elevate the whole team and make sure everybody's pulling on the rope together. So Kelly, I hear you're back now. So
yeah, you made that so well. I love listening to you communicate things. I think I never thought of it that way. You were showing me my spreadsheet, teaching me stuff. It was awesome. Anyway, the point is we want to involve the advisors. So every week something's going to happen. There's going to be a touch point. For 90 minutes, we're going to spend twice a month with you as a group together. All the people that are in the group, it's a maximum now of 10 shops per group, and we're online and we're talking about Kevin is the king of something, somebody else is the queen of something, and we're working together. How do I get better where you're at? How do you get better where I'm at? And we work together as a team. So once a month is a meeting just about the composite, comparing shop to shop. Then the next meeting in a month is all the same people online, but we're looking at some new training. Maybe we need training on effective labor rate. How do we fix that? Because we need to bring that up. And some other training about, hours per repair order, increasing car count, making every car count, whatever we see in the composite that the group needs. So every week you're doing something. And then the other thing that happens once a month is a service advisors meeting. So they take 90 and they hopefully get away from there, don't have to answer the phone while they're on this meeting. And now they're working with other advisors from all across North America, and everybody's king or queen of something. So I look at my composite, which is also yours, but I'm seeing my portion, and oh my goodness, I'm comparing myself to other shops, and I have the highest hours per repair order this month. I'm the king of this. And somebody says, look at this, I've got got 96 pre-booked appointments. And so now the advisors get more excited about the group concept because they're part of it. Usually what happens, you go off to a group meeting, Tom, you know this well, you go after a meeting, you're there for 3 days, you come back and everybody's going, no, you're not coming back from another one of those meetings, and you're going to want to change everything. And I tell people, it gets to the point your employees really don't want you to come to these meetings because you're gone and now they're working harder, and then you come back and you want to change everything. But when you get them involved and they go, hey, Tom, hey, Kevin, hey, Susan, I want to get our hours per repair order up. You see that guy down there in Chicago? He's got me beat now. So everybody has the ability to be able to excuse me, to be king or queen there. So again, there's a meeting every week called Take 90, and 2 meetings a month is the full group. 1 meeting a month is with your advisor, and once a month is on one-on-one coaching. And every month you're going to be communicating with Kevin or Kevin and I. Sometimes we do it together, and so we do one-on-one coaching with you so you can deal with issues that you really would rather not deal with the group itself. You also, when you're in a group, you get access to all the current and future online sessions. At this point, it said there was 12. There's actually about 14 now. We give you the comprehensive financial analysis tool that I just showed you. You also get the monthly composite comparing you to all the other shops. There are tools. There are spreadsheets. We have a live summit meeting once a year for everybody. And there's the online group where groups can share information online. As Kevin mentioned, you've got a new form. You put it up there. Everybody gets an email that Kevin uploaded, a new form, a new process, a new questionnaire, a new whatever. So now we're working together and sharing all this information. I got something new. I want to share it with the entire team. And then, of course, we do one for service advisors as well. So service advisors can say, hey, I just put together this neat little thing, and send it up to the group and say, what do you think? And we're sharing information, working together. Almost done here, and then I'm going to open up to questions. For those of you that have questions afterwards, you can contact me, Kelly at kellythecoach.com. And by the way, just so you know, group members, you also get our cell phone numbers. If you have super urgent things, then you can contact us directly. I don't want to go through detail the on meeting, etc. Just to let you know, the current and we mean done recorded webinars that are already online. One called Manage Better 2017, Improved Operations, which is about how to be more efficient and streamlining. Another one I put together called Improved Communications between the customer and the advisor. It says customs, it should be customers. How many problems are caused in the shop because of a lack of communication between the customer, the advisor, the tech, and then back from the tech, the advisor to the customer. One of my favorite subjects, how to sell diagnostic labor. That's an hour-and-a-half session just on that itself. 65 ways to increase car count, which is actually like a Hollywood style. Some of you have seen it. It's this 3 days in studio were recorded at high def, and it's got all these wonderful graphics, and it's 65 ways to increase car count. Another one I put together called Mastering Scheduling, how to tune up your profits. And then there's Service Advisor Training, Service Advisor Selling Skills, Service Advisor Essentials is another one. The one that I just mentioned is the 5-part series on financial management. And then there's a GemCar demo that we did. Mike Kelly is another sales rep and trainer, and Kevin's a trainer with GemCar. If it's something you want to look at GemCar, you can watch that webinar. And there's the one on how to download. It's about $1,400 worth of webinars, and I don't need to get into that. Some of the things that are included. This was from March 21, when it was my 55th birthday. By the way, we sold that out so quickly. I mean, there was more people than we could possibly handle, so I had to literally double the ability to do the go-to-meeting so we could deal with 50 people per call instead of just 25. These are the tools that you get with that. Again, I'm sending this to you as a spreadsheet. And I just want to get to the meetings. We won't get into that. Sorry to go through this so quickly here. I did this afternoon. I wanted to make it shorter this evening, and it ended up being longer. But as a trainer, you want to cover absolutely everything, and you can't. Just to let you know, all of that includes everything that we just mentioned. The setup fee is $730 per shop, and that includes everything that we just talked about. So when you sign up for a group, you can just email me. I will call you personally. We'll talk about it. But you get all of those webinars online. You have access to those instantaneously. I send you all of the spreadsheets, including the composite, and then it's monthly $330. Now, I know that's much less expensive than other groups out there, and I'm not trying to be the cheapest group guide. That's not what this is about. But because it's online, and because the training's online, one of the things that frustrated me with groups is you've got a group that's together, and then somebody new comes along, and they're asking, what's the difference between markup and gross profit? And you spend time on that. And then they go, but what's productivity again? And the current members are getting frustrated because we're teaching kindergarten over again, and that's okay for this person to come up to speed. Well, in this case, because all the training's available online, you better not be in a meeting asking what productivity is, because you should have watched that webinar. You would have gone through all 5. We don't allow people to join the group unless they've taken all 5 parts of the financial management, because we don't want to hold back the members that are really there because somebody new came along. And it's not that we don't want new people, we do. And there's an excitement about that. And you look at somebody and think, oh, I was there when I had 23,000 receivables. I fixed that. Yeah, I remember the days where I had the problem with keeping employees like you have now. But so it's nice to bring somebody new in, fresh meat, we call it, and you get to see where you've come from, and that's helpful. But to spend so much of the meeting time talking about things that people have already done, again, the online training makes that so much simpler, and it's much less expensive for a shop because they don't have to go to California for that 8 days or go to Seattle. Bob and I put together that 5-day advisor class. Many people on this line have taken that training. 5 days of service advisors training was awesome. Bob and I put together the first one, and we were in tears at the end. It was such a neat experience. But it costs money to fly somebody for a 5-day class and pay for the hotels and the meals and all of that. So it's a different way of doing it. It's all available online. With that, I'm going to be done. Just so you know, I'm sending you this recording, so you're going to be able to watch it online, and the one that shows you how to download this to your hard drive. You can watch it whenever you want. You can pause, you can rewind, you can do whatever you want. You can share it with people, that's fine. And then I'm going to be sending you the income statement analysis tool. I'm going to send you that spreadsheet that I just showed you to see what the net profit per month per technician could be with 1 tech, 3 techs. You could do a month, you could do a week, you could do a day, you could do a year, you can do whatever you want with that. And I'm going to be sending you both of the parts matrices, the algorithmic and the initial one we put together, that both have advantages, and a couple of articles as well. With that, I'm going to turn it over to questions. You do have the ability to go into the chat portion of this, and I do apologize. I went over this afternoon. We didn't, but I did now, and I didn't want to. Anyway, thank you very much for those of you that need to go. I know it's going to be later for you. It's only 8:15 for me, but 10:15 for those of you that are on the East Coast. Somebody in Atlantic Canada or in Newfoundland, it's 3.5 hours ahead of me. Anyway, in the chat box, you can put together any questions that you have and simply go into chat and you send me the questions.
Kelly, it's Kevin. I just one comment I'd like to make. Something different from this afternoon and even some of the other trainings that you've done. And I'm sure everybody can see this, and this, once again, is not a commercial, but you have such a wealth of knowledge and stuff that you're sharing. It's too bad because, you know, if we got a mix between this afternoon and this evening seminar to be able to make sure that everybody understands what you're offering, I don't know if somebody's really interested in seeing both, would you be willing to have it? I know it's 4 hours of content, but because your skill set, like what you shared in the first part to where you did, there were a lot of things that you skipped over because of time restraints, but I really see value in both sides of it. So I'm just wondering, is that an option as well?
See, that's why we have other people. I'll send you both. I'll send you both, and you'll see, you know, if you saw me teach a class one day, I might teach it differently the next day. You know, like I'm going to say from now on that running a shop without a time clock is like running a gas station without meters.
Yeah, I love it.
And things that you've taught me. And I look back and I think, oh my God, I was such a rookie in the 90s. And I could look back to last week and think, why didn't I think of this? And you know what's funny, Kevin, is I'll have somebody say, you remember you said this? I think, oh my God, I haven't mentioned that in 15 years. You know, I have found workshops, Kevin, that I've written that I forgot. I'm going through an email and think, oh yeah, I put that together for the World Pack Expo in Florida years ago. And there's no shortage of information for sure. But again, it is about the implementation. And Kevin, you see it. You've got people running the same software. One does far better in their shop than somebody else.
Yep.
And to see somebody doing $18,000 a month per technician and working hard, and somebody doing $28,000 and doing $42,000. There's so many different factors there. Now, just so you know, I've unmuted, so if you would rather vocally ask a question, you can do that. But out of fairness for you, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the recording. So with that, for those of you that are listening to it, I'm going to stop the recording here. If you have questions and you're watching this as the recorded session, Kelly at kellythecoach.com, you can ask me questions, and I'm going to turn it over to the people that are on this live session. So with that, thank you, everybody, and I encourage you to go back and kick butt And again, it's about what you do with what we've talked about, not just learning. It's like reading a book and not doing anything about it. Anyway, thank you very much.